Chapter 361, Overnight Sensation, Third Update. Mr. Yajima and I are of the same mind, Lahar said with a firm nod. Though he'd never met Lucian in person, he'd studied the new Magic Council's dossier on the so-called cat magician. They rated his power almost on par with the Holy 10 Wizard Saints, enough to make short work of the mechanical magic gorilla before them. It's clear you two place great faith in the rebuilt Fairy Tale Guild. We join you in hoping they not only advance, but shine in the official rounds. The announcer acknowledged Lahar's words and cleared his throat. The 9th qualifying match of the day will begin shortly. Contestants, please prepare. Inside the reinforced steel chamber, the mechanical magic gorilla stirred, massive gears clicking as it rose to its feet. Alzak, standing beside Lucian, studied the creature coolly. Then he leaned in and offered a tactical suggestion. Lucian, why don't you hold back a bit this round? Conserve your strength. Across the preliminaries, every top guild had employed the same tactic, deploying only part of their power to avoid drawing too much attention before the official tournament. It was a cautious strategy, but one that could pay off later, especially when you were as formidable as Lucian. This time, the Fairy Tale Guild's standing rests entirely on Lucian's shoulders. The rest of us are simply here to back him up. If we can help him take down that mechanical magic gorilla, he'll enter tomorrow's individual contest on the same footing as the other guild masters, and no one will be able to zero in on his unique spells. That won't be necessary, Lucian said, shaking his head with a confident smile. The truly powerful aren't afraid of being targeted. I'll handle this guy. You four need to conserve your magic and prepare for tomorrow's matches. With that, Lucian turned his attention to the charging construct. Its gears whirred and its joints creaked. Each movement radiated raw, arcane energy. As the gorilla closed the distance, Lucian stepped out of the group and produced a silver coin from his pocket-like dressing space. He spun it between his fingers and flipped it into the air, eyes never leaving the foe. Targeted? He murmured. Hardly. Lucian wasn't like the mages who specialized in a single school of magic. He'd spent years perfecting fire and ice, lightning and earth, even the subtler arts of spirit and soul. He'd trained his body until every muscle responded to his will as readily as any elemental current. And his sense of justice and honor, his moral core, was just as finely honed. In every sense, he was the complete mage. The silver coin spun in a blur, catching the sunlight one instant before Lucian's palm closed around it. Let's see how you fare against a master of every discipline, he said. Energy crackled at his fingertips, ready to transform that simple coin into the first move of a dazzling, multifaceted assault. Around him, the 4 guildmates fell silent, watching the showdown unfold. Tomorrow's battles were waiting, but for now, all eyes were on Lucian as he prepared to confront the mechanical beast alone. Targeted strikes only work when the gap in strength isn't too great. Once the chasm becomes too wide, pinpointing a single foe is meaningless. It's like water against fire. A gentle stream can smother a small blaze, but an inferno burning at its peak will simply vaporize the water. Lucian eyed the other wizards taking part in the contest. None of them impressed him as a world-shaking threat. No Sauron to worry about. There was no need for him to feign weakness at the outset, no reason to grind down all 4 opponents until they were exhausted and bloody. Even if he still ended up with the highest score, such a hollow victory wouldn't satisfy him. What Lucian wanted was a clean sweep from start to finish, a performance so overwhelming that every spectator and every mage had to admit Fairy Tale's power, even with most of its top players absent. Only by displaying that level of dominance could he lure in the best magic, talents, and attract wealthy patrons eager to commission the guild. He took a deep breath, centered himself, and unleashed his trump card. Super electromagnetic cannon. More than 1 billion volts of crackling energy burst from Lucian's body. Calmly, he extended a single finger toward the silver coin tumbling through the air. In an instant, the coin transformed into a terrifying electromagnetic cannon, unleashing its might in a blinding arc of searing power. Boom! A thunderous crack rang out as the mechanical magic gorilla, barely halfway through its charge, collapsed in a shower of sparks. A hole twice the size of a basketball gaped in its metal chest. Instant kill, Lucian declared. Before Lucky and the others could react, the fight was already over. They gaped at the fallen automaton in stunned silence. They all knew Lucian's reputation. He was the strongest mage in Fairy Tail, the one who had defeated Laxus, yet none expected him to destroy an S-class level construct in a single strike, as though swatting a fly. "All right," Lucky said, shaking off his shock. "Let's get ready for the official match." Lucian returned to Lucky's shoulder, closed his eyes, and sifted through the mechanics of his fairy ball magic in his mind. The preliminaries held no real challenge for him. He didn't even need to draw on his magic reserves. With his electromagnetic cannon alone, an ability that outclassed even Misaka Mikoto, he could take out any ordinary S-class mage in one shot, save for those from Fairy Tail. Lucian would never have bothered showing up if it weren't for the guild's long-term plans. His true concerns lay elsewhere: the 5 dragons of the northern continent and the world-shattering Black Dragon. Yet here he was, leading Lucky and the other 4 through the heavy steel doors of the arena's combat chamber. Outside, the crowd was stunned into silence, all eyes glued to the enormous viewing screen. Even the most elite guilds usually sent a single high-level wizard to face a mechanical magic gorilla, and still took ages to bring it down. Fairy Tail, however, dispatched only 1 cat, and with a single decisive strike, the beast collapsed in a shower of sparks. The contrast was breathtaking. Most of the spectators were ordinary townsfolk, curious about magic, but without any real understanding of it. They knew Fairy Tail by reputation, rumors of spectacular collateral damage on missions, and Mirajane's frequent glamorous magazine covers. Beyond diehard fans and the residents of Magnolia City, few even suspected a mage like Lucian existed. That was a mistake they'd soon regret. Everyone in the arena froze when, among the 5 fighters representing Fairy Tail, the humble guild with only 4 mages and a single cat, the seemingly sleeping feline suddenly stirred. With barely more than a flick of its paw, the cat unleashed a torrent of magic so devastating that the towering mechanical gorilla dissolved into sparks in seconds. First came stunned silence, then an uproar. "Fairy Tail! Fairy Tail! Cat! Cat!" By dawn, Lucian, the once overlooked cat mage, had become a legend. Wizards and commoners alike whispered his name. Fairy Tail's strongest wizard. Even Jalal respects him. If Lucian's on their side, first place won't be easy to claim. High above the noise, Jura of Snake Princess Scale's Holy 10 sat with folded hands and a warm smile. He remembered all too well the day his guild joined forces with Blue Pegasus and Fairy Tail to topple the 6 demon generals, and how Jalal's power had shone that day. As a fellow Holy 10, Jura knew strength when he saw it, and quietly admitted that Lucian might soon rival them all. Here is a polished, idiomatic rewrite of the scene, with George renamed to Lucian and clarified as a male. "So that's the cat Lucy's been raving about." The 3 handsome mages of Blue Pegasus exchanged knowing looks as Lucian leapt back into the arena alongside his Fairy Tail teammates. They all remembered how, during the clash with the 6 demon generals, Lucy had declared that if Luke Huff Ian hadn't been away on that notorious 100 Years quest, their guild would never have been driven to the brink. Around the ring, wizards from other guilds murmured among themselves. It wasn't just the star mages of Fairy Tail they now needed to watch. It was that seemingly ordinary feline warrior, too. "I never expected the major guilds to be this weak," sneered a voice drifting over from Swordbite Tiger's corner. "They went down with a single blow. Oga, you'll deal with that trash later. Let's make sure everyone knows Swordbite Tiger is the kingdom's greatest." Just as Lucian and the 4 humans settled into their starting positions, a cold, arrogant voice thundered across the stadium. Every head turned at once, eyes fixed on whoever dared to speak so boldly. Lucian pressed through the crowd and caught sight of 2 imposing figures at the center of the hall. One was a broad-shouldered elder in a tall black hat, its rim shadowing the deep-set lines of his face. A carved guild emblem gleamed on his forehead, and a string of polished wooden prayer beads hung from his neck. His long white beard and hair framed a voice as steady as a thunderclap. "Stand back," the old man called out. "We'll show them exactly what true thunder magic can do." Beside him, a hulking warrior flexed his muscles. He wore only a tiger-skin skirt, his torso bronzed and scarred from countless battles. With a roar that rattled the rafters, he added, That ought to teach these upstarts some respect. A few rows back, a circle of mages leaned in, trading uneasy glances. One wizard, his robes edged in silver, shook his head in disbelief. "You haven't heard of them?" he muttered. Swordbite Tiger was no more than a backwater guild until a handful of months ago. Then 5 newcomers arrived, each rumored to be as powerful as an S-rank mage, and overnight they became the talk of the continent. Lucian's pulse quickened. If Swordbite Tiger was truly that strong, this exhibition might be more than just a show of force. It could change everything. Chapter 362, Alchemy Master Lucian, Update 1. 5 S-Class, a murmur ran through the arena. Everyone was stunned. 5 S-Class wizards, that was the hallmark of a top-tier guild. In Phantom Lord's history, only the Guild Master and 5 other S-Class mages, 4 elemental wizards plus an Iron Dragon Slayer, had ever offered a real challenge to Fairy Tail. With the 9th heat concluded, 3 guilds, including Fairy Tail, had already secured their spots. Now the announcer's voice rang out once more. And finally, Swordbite Tiger. The last 11 teams strode forward and filed into the steel chamber beside them. Moments later, the magical projection above the stage crackled to life. Death Deal Magic Black Thunder Cannon! The chamber door slammed shut, and within seconds, the match was over. Oga, the mage known as Swordbite Tiger, had thrust both arms forward, unleashing jagged bolts of pitch-black lightning as thick as his forearms. The bolts struck the mechanical gorilla construct squarely, tearing through its enchanted plating and ending the fight in a single, blinding flash. "Swordbite Tiger!" The crowd erupted in cheers. Across the way, Lucian's eyes snapped open. He felt no surprise. He had expected nothing less from Swordbite Tiger's signature attack. Many guilds could unleash an instant kill spell if they truly wished. They simply choose to keep such techniques hidden. What really captures Lucian's attention, however, is the magic Oga just used. It isn't an ordinary elemental technique. It's a form of lost magic. Lost magics are spells that thrived in ancient times, but have since vanished. Dragon-slaying magic, for instance, is classified as lost because, until Natsu and his comrades reappeared, no mage had practiced it for ages, and not a single grimoire survives. Oga's god-slaying magic falls into the same category. Just as dragon-slaying spells grant a decisive advantage against dragons, god-slaying spells are rumored to carry a unique potency against deities. Legends even speak of a third discipline, demon-slaying magic, designed with special power over demons. God-slaying, fascinating, Lucian mutters to himself. I'll have to study that memory when I get the chance. He's only just begun to touch the true essence of thunder. Exploring its various manifestations will accelerate his understanding, from primal, arcane storms, the ancient magic of thunder, to pure electromagnetism, the raw force of a billion-volt strike. Lucian leaned back, his palms still tingling from the crackling power he'd just unleashed. Over the past hour, he had experimented with blending raw electromagnetism and arcane energy to forge what he'd come to call a plasma electromagnetic cannon. It was nothing short of spectacular and dangerous. By calling upon the Taoist thunder, the Thunder Emperor had taught him how to shape and summon thunderbolts strong enough to bind and subdue malevolent spirits. Next, he planned to master the Thunder God Bane spell, capable of restraining deities, the Thunder Demon Bane for obliterating fiends, and the Thunder Dragon Bane to humble even the mightiest drakes. Once he had all three, he'd command every facet of the storm and might finally ascend to the coveted 6th tier of ability users. Outside the training hall, the 10th group's 10 remaining teams wrapped up their elimination matches. By day's end, only 30 squads had advanced, including Lucian's 5-person mage unit. Their mechanical magic gorilla construct, a hulking beast of gears and runes, had put up a fierce fight. Yet any team of 5 competent medium-level spellcasters could synergize long enough to tear it down, as the statistics showed. 4 groups earned promotion from this round, setting the stage for tomorrow's even stiffer competition. Night descended as the first day of trials concluded. Lucian and his 4 teammates met with Macau and the other contenders at a nearby tavern supplied by the royal family. Over steaming bowls of noodles and clinking tankards, they exchanged battle stories and theories on thunder magic. Laughter and spirited debate carried them until the moon stood high. Only then did they return to the grand dormitory quarters bestowed by the crown, each of them secretly eager for the challenges the next dawn would bring. Lucian stood by the dormitory window, the late afternoon sunlight casting long shadows across the floor. "Tomorrow is the individual competition," he announced, turning to face the 4 students gathered in his room. Though the precise rules hadn't been spelled out yet, everyone knew these duels would be fought one-on-one and on points. He paced slowly, outlining the stakes. This official tournament uses a point system. Whoever accumulates the most points earns the title of Strongest Wizard. Right now, I'm in the lead, but only if all of you hold your own tomorrow. If any of you lose your match, even my victory won't keep us at the top. Our team score will tumble. Each of the 4 exchanged determined glances. They'd been riding Lucian's momentum since the preliminaries began, and none of them wanted to be the weak link. Their hands curled into fists, resolve shining in their eyes. Lucian softened his tone. "Don't take this as pressure, but I expect your best. Give it everything you've got, no quarter asked, no quarter given. And if things don't go our way, don't despair. After the individual rounds, we'll have group battles in the grand melee to claw our way back." With that, he lifted his right hand. The soft fur, retractable claws, and delicate pads marked it unmistakably as his feline paw, one of Lucian's more unusual qualities. He waved it in a casual salute. "Fight smart, fight hard, and above all, fight together." His gaze swept across the room, and a quiet confidence settled over them. Tomorrow, they'd prove that Griffon House was a force to be reckoned with, one duel at a time. "You still need to make proper preparations first," one of them reminded him. "Preparations?" the 4 of them echoed, exchanging puzzled looks. "Preparations that will strengthen you for what's to come." Lucian's lips curled into a sly, cat-like smile. Wizards never rely solely on their innate magic. Many augment their power with enchanted tools. In fact, there's an entire branch of the craft known as holding wizards, specialists in combat magic weapons. Astral wizards like Lucy fall into that category, as does the formidable Mist Gang. By coincidence, or perhaps fate, Lucian had spent the last week studying alchemy in every realm he could access, from the corridors of Hogwarts to the forests of Middle-earth. His dedication had elevated him to true master-level skill. He glanced at Alzaka and Biska, both experts in gun magic, and said, "Let me see your guns." Though they didn't know exactly what he had in mind, Alzaka and Biska trusted him implicitly. They produced their weapons, Alzaka's sleek sniper rifle and Biska's pair of enchanted handguns. Lucian cradled the 3 firearms in his hands, eyes flicking over the intricate runes along their barrels. Then, with swift, precise movements of his claw-tipped fingers, he set to work, weaving in alchemical enhancements and sealing them with a final, humming charm. A few moments later, he returned the weapons. Alzaka and Biska holstered their guns, marveling at the subtle shimmer along the metal and the barely audible pulse of new power coursing through each weapon. Lucian simply nodded. "Now you're ready." Lucian's voice was calm but confident as he addressed them. "I've amplified the power of the magic rounds in your guns. Give them a try." With that, he led the 4 of them out into the barren hills beyond the city walls. Alzak hefted his twin pistols, and Biska readied her long-range rifle. When they reached a clear line of sight to the nearest rise, Alzak barked, "Spark shot!" and Biska followed with, "Bullet storm." Alzak's pistols roared in unison. Each round crackled with thunderous energy, gouging away half of the hill's face in an instant. At the same moment, Biska's sniper rounds burst outward in a sheet of searing flame, obliterating the other half. The air trembled with shockwaves. Dirt and rock cascaded down the slope like miniature avalanches. Lucian watched with a satisfied smile. By channeling his own mastery of thunder and fire into their weapons, he had imbued every bullet with elemental force. Neither Alzak nor Biska were naturally prodigious mages. They'd honed their skills across both the western and eastern continents, but their raw magical power was middling at best. Thanks to Lucian's enchantments, however, their gunfire could now rival the kind of devastation that, before, only an S-rank magician might unleash. It still wouldn't be enough to topple the very highest tier of sorcerers, but it would level the playing field against anyone below S-rank. What incredible destructive force! Alzak and Biska stood speechless, staring at the once towering hill now reduced to rubble. They looked down at the magic guns trembling in their hands, This power surge was almost absurd. Lucian gave them a curt nod. Reaching into his storage pouch, he withdrew 2 slender wands and pressed one into Marcus's hand, the other into Lucky's. "From now on, channel your spells through these," he said. "They'll help you focus and control your magic." Chapter 363, President, You Are Our Blessing, Second Update. Magic in the Harry Potter world obeys different rules than the magic of fairy tale. Until now, the wands Lucian had crafted could only amplify Harry Potter-style spells. They were flatly useless against fairy tale magic. But after deploying more of his clones, studying a wider array of magical traditions, and refining his alchemy to a master level, Lucian has finally overcome that limitation. He laid 2 wands on the table. These were the mass-produced models he'd assembled in the basement during his fairy ball research. Each wand shaft was carved from wood, condensed by a wood dragon's life force, and each core was a strand of Lucian's own hair, magically bound to his essence. The result was astonishing. Any wizard below S rank casting through one of these wands multiplies their magical power tenfold, and even S rank sorcerers see at least a 3-fold boost. Lucian has produced 100 of these wands, planning to distribute them to every guild member and raise the entire group's combat prowess. What he didn't expect was that one of the realm's most formidable magicians would be the first to put his new creations to the test. Lucian's plan was simple: equip every one of the guild's less powerful wizards with their own spell amplifier. Ever since the strongest mages, those who'd joined simply for glory, had drifted away, the remaining members needed a boost. By raising each individual's power, he believed the guild's overall strength would skyrocket, tasks would be completed faster, and a new cycle of success would take hold. Even those whose signature tools, like Alzak and Biska with their heavy magic guns, couldn't channel a wand's finesse, would have their weapons specially transformed and enchanted to amplify every spell they cast. In the training hall, Marcus and Lecky stared at the slim wooden rods in their hands, clearly baffled. From any casual glance, they looked like nothing more than brittle sticks. "What is this?" Marcus asked, tapping the end as if expecting it to snap. Lucian grinned. "These are your spell amplifiers. Give them a try. You'll want the edge for tomorrow's skirmish." Before their eyes, the tip of each wand pulsed with a soft inner light. To demonstrate, Lucian wove his fingers through a simple incantation, summoned a small fireball, and directed it at a distant target. Where it hit, the flame exploded into a roaring blaze, twice the size he'd shown just yesterday, searing the wooden training dummy to charcoal. Lecky's eyes glittered. That much more power? His voice trembled with excitement. Marcus didn't answer. He'd already begun testing his rod, shaping a crackling bolt of arcane energy between his hands. When he released it, the air itself seemed to shudder. Both men shared a look of pure envy, remembering Alzak and Biska's sleek, transformed rifles that practically doubled their firepower in battle. Lucian watched them grin, fully satisfied. This was exactly the start of the virtuous cycle he'd promised the guild. Tomorrow, he thought, they would fight stronger, and together, they'd win. Sand magic shrapnel. Wood form. Eternal bond. Marcus and Lucky raised their wands in unison. Yellow and green magic circles blossomed at their tips, summoning a roaring sandstorm and towering wooden appendages that pounded the training field. When the spell subsided, the flat earth had been hollowed into a vast crater. Lucian surveyed the destruction with a satisfied nod. That's just a sample of fairy tale magic. With a graceful gesture, he wove restoration magic, smoothing the crater and rebuilding the hill as though nothing had happened. Then he led his teammates back toward the dormitory. "Don't worry, President," he said over his shoulder. "We'll claim those individual points tomorrow." Marcus, Lucky, and the 2 others, still catching their breath, exchanged excited grins. But Lucian raised a hand. "Not quite enough," he declared. Reaching into the dressing space, he produced 4 heavy cloaks, each stitched with the fairy tale emblem. Handing one to each teammate, he added, "These will tip the scales in your favor." They gripped the cloaks eagerly, confidence renewed for the challenge ahead. "Before tomorrow's battle, each of you will don one of these cloaks," Lucian announced, laying 4 garments on the table. "Against ordinary foes, your own strength should suffice. But if you come up against S-rank adversaries or magic you can't predict, activate the cloak." The 4 trainees exchanged curious glances as they picked up the cloaks. Lucian gave a short nod. "Put them on, and channel your mana into the runes embroidered along the hem." Obediently, they slipped the cloaks around their shoulders and wove threads of magic into the fibers. In an instant, all 4 vanished from sight. At the same moment, each felt the reassuring thrum of a protective barrier, like an invisible suit of armor hugging their bodies. "These aren't ordinary cloaks," Lucian explained, stepping forward. "I forged them myself, using alchemy to bind both an illusion spell and an armor ward to the fabric. As long as you feed them mana, they'll render you invisible and grant you a magical shield." He paused, meeting their wide-eyed stares. "If you ever find yourselves outmatched tomorrow, switch on the cloaks and strike from the shadows. A well-timed sneak attack could turn defeat into victory." Lucian smiled. These enchanted cloaks were meant to accompany every fairy tale wizard, much like our mass-produced magic wands. Consider them your secret edge. "Mr. President, you're incredible." As Lucian shrugged off his cloak, the 4 onlookers stared at him in admiration. It seemed as though he never ran out of magical trinkets, a treasure trove of artifacts at his command. They all felt fortunate to have Lucian as their student council president. "Now, each of you will get one of these boxes," Lucian announced, reaching into the hidden compartment of his cloak. "If my shadow cloak and the spells I've given you still aren't enough, open this." He produced 4 small, ornately carved boxes and handed one to each student. Their eyes widened as they lifted the lids. Inside, each box housed an extra-dimensional chamber as vast as a football field. Within those chambers stood towering steel giants, nearly 25 meters tall, silent but imposing. "These are automaton sentinels," Lucian explained. "They don't wield magic, but their offense and defense are top tier. Once released, they'll follow your commands and engage any enemy you choose. Consider them loyal assistants." He then walked them through the control sigils and incantation sequence needed to awaken and direct the sentinels. Crafted through a blend of mimicry magic, transmutation spells, and awakening charms, these enchanted puppets were akin to the guardian constructs patrolling the main academy grounds. Powerful, obedient, and utterly reliable. Lucian finished calibrating the enchantments on each of the 4 sets of gear, running his fingertips over the intricate runes until they glowed with a steady light. Raw power didn't mean as much to him these days, but for ordinary wizards, even a small boost could tip the scales in a fight. "With these enhancements," he said, "even if you face an S-class opponent, you'll still have a chance." He stepped back, letting the 4 new recruits admire their gear. Lucian exhaled softly. S-class wizards could vary wildly in strength. Against most of them, his teammates now stood a real chance. Of course, battles were never predictable. A single unlucky moment could turn the tide. But there would be more team matches and larger-scale fights ahead. And among the 30 promotion teams, only a handful boasted true S-class talent they might never even meet in the arena. Against anyone below that threshold, his 4 comrades would prevail. "President, you're our savior," one of them exclaimed, clutching the glowing box like a treasure. "We wouldn't have stood a chance without you," another added eagerly. Lucian allowed himself a small smile. "All right, enough gratitude for now. Get a good night's rest. You'll need every ounce of focus tomorrow." As he turned to leave, the 4 of them called after him in unison, voices brimming with relief and admiration. Lucian offered a final nod and walked out, already plotting their next training session, and steeling himself for whatever challenges lay ahead. Make sure they understand tomorrow that Fairy Tale will forever be the strongest guild in the kingdom. With that, Lucian offered the other 4 a confident nod and strode back to his room. As for the 5 S-class wizards of Swordbite Tiger, once their martial display concludes, he plans to begin intensive training with the remaining 30 guild members, transforming each of them into S-class combatants in their own right. Chapter 364. Not on the same level. On the second day after the great demon had taught his martial arts, the conference arena was just as packed as before. 30 guild teams of wizards filed in, and the crowd's roar was deafening. Yesterday, only Macao and a handful of Fairy Tale members had cheered, but today, thanks to Lucian's breathtaking instant kill, nearly a quarter of the spectators were rooting for them. After all, strength draws admirers. When someone displays overwhelming power, followers inevitably gather. Once the host welcomed everyone, he handed the microphone to the Pumpkin Man from yesterday's announcement. "Mr. Pumpkin, please explain today's competition rules." A magical projection of the Pumpkin Man flickered above the arena. "Today we're holding an individual tournament. Our magic system will randomly pair every contestant. No one is exempt, not even our own guild wizards, for one-on-one duels. May the best mage win." Lucian stood at the edge of the grand arena, his eyes fixed on the floating projection of the Pumpkin Man announcer. When the illusion finally flickered out of view, 10 intricate magic circles burst to life across the field, each one glowing with a pale blue radiance. In an instant, 10 raised platforms, perfectly circular and enclosed, rose from the ground, carving out the battle arenas for today's matches. A clear, authoritative voice rang out from the judges' podium. "Reminder, each victory earns your guild 10 points, a loss earns 0. Should 2 contestants be evenly matched at the end of the allotted time, each receives 5 points. If any combatant loses all ability to fight or explicitly surrenders, they will be deemed the loser. And under no circumstances may you kill your opponent. Any death results in immediate disqualification of both the offending participant and their entire guild." Lucian's gaze drifted over the space magic circles that marked each arena's boundary. He'd been fascinated by their dual function ever since witnessing yesterday's demonstrations. Not only could they transport people and objects into the rings, but they could also send them back out again. Rumor held that the Royal Magic Development Bureau, and beyond it, the vast Royal Library, kept even more advanced space magic circles on file. He made a mental note. Once the Archmage's military training course concluded, he must pay a visit. In his own guild's library at Fairytale, Lucian had scoured the shelves for references to the colossal teleportation circle used by the Magic Council, but found nothing. Clearly, some secrets were kept well hidden. He shifted his staff, anticipation knotting in his stomach. The next duel would begin within minutes, and he intended to prove that no secret could outpace his own determination. Lucian wove his way through the bustling exhibition hall, eyes locked on the massive teleportation circle at its center. Such large-scale teleportation magic was a strategic national asset, jealously protected by the royal family and the Magic Council. Its use demanded draconian conditions, above all, the near-insatiable consumption of magic crystals. Yet even these harsh requirements couldn't dim Lucian's curiosity. He'd already mastered portkeys, handy for quick, small-scale jumps, but utterly impractical for moving large groups. If he could dissect the workings of this grand circle, he just might discover a way to amplify his own teleportation spells. And there was more to explore. The kingdom's Bureau of Magical Development and its legendary Royal Library beckoned with promises of untold arcane lore. Lucian hoped they might even hold clues to time magic, a discipline he'd long dreamed of unraveling. A sudden hush swept over the hall. The MC, known affectionately as the Pumpkin Man for his bright orange robes and wide grin, stepped forward. "Now, let's begin the first round of draws." He pointed dramatically at the enormous overhead screen. Instantly, the names of 150 competing mages began to flash by at breakneck speed. "Stop!" The scrolling names froze. Moments later, the stage lights brightened, and the first group of contestants filed in from the side wings, forming a neat line. At the very front stood Lucian of the Fairytale Guild, and at his side, the famed swordsman known as Oga the Sword-Biting Tiger. From his vantage in the grandstand, Lucian watched as the arena erupted in excitement. The 2 lightning magi who had stolen the spotlight yesterday were squaring off once more, and the crowd could hardly contain itself. No one had forgotten how, side by side, the pair had felled that gigantic mechanical magic gorilla with a single, devastating thunderbolt. Their synchronized strike had been nothing short of spectacular. "There's something fishy about this," Lucian murmured, narrowing his eyes. Was it really mere coincidence that yesterday's standout performers were drawn against each other in the very first round, and in the opening bracket no less? Of course not. The royal family sponsoring the tournament was clearly intent on showcasing its heaviest hitters right out of the gate, guaranteeing a rousing start to the competition. He'd seen the same trick pulled on Holovid variety shows back home. Producers rigged the random draw, carefully scripting big-name face-offs to boost ratings. Here, the Crown's goal was similar: stir up excitement, capture the kingdom's attention, and build momentum for the battles yet to come. Any pretense of a fair lottery was just that, a pretense. The real show was already in motion. Lucian studied the tournament bracket projected above the arena. How could they arrange the matches to thrill the entire audience, yet ensure each fight remained fair? If seasoned archmages were paired at random with apprentices, the novices would be exterminated in seconds. Hardly entertaining. As he scanned the lineup, he realized the organizers had intentionally matched fighters of similar rank. The top students against each other, the lower-ranked cadets likewise. That way, no team could pull miles ahead after the solo duels, preserving the suspense for the upcoming pair and guild battles. Of course, the Crown might also be hoping to coax every contestant into unveiling all their magical talents, an ideal opportunity to collect intelligence on every spell at play. Lucian couldn't shake the feeling that the Grand Duelists Guild had a hidden agenda. A fanfare echoed through the arena. First group, to the stages. 19 fighters and, astonishingly, 1 cat took their places on the 10 elevated platforms. A ripple of laughter and disbelief ran through the crowd. Lucian's eyes narrowed when he spotted his own opponent pacing confidently on the opposite stage. He blinked. "A cat?" he muttered. "My first adversary is literally a cat. I heard you defeated Laxus before?" Perched on the arena ring, Oga crossed his arms and smirked. Lucian tilted his head. "Do you know him?" Oga shrugged. "I don't actually know him, just his reputation. They say he's an S-class lost magic mage who wields thunder dragon slaying magic. Supposed to be incredibly powerful, but lately he's fallen on hard times. Otherwise, how could he lose to a cat?" His voice dripped with contempt. Oga himself was an S-class lost magic wielder and had always eyed Laxus as his greatest rival, someone he hoped to challenge one day to prove he was the supreme lightning mage. Learning that Laxus had been bested by a cat and ultimately slain by a dragon had left him bitterly disappointed. "So we're not acquainted," Oga continued, triumphant. "That's for the best." Lucian simply nodded, flexing his cat-like paws. If Oga had been friends with Laxus, he might hold back. Since he wasn't, Lucian could unleash his full power, then let the match begin. At the announcer's roar, 2 armored kingdom guards struck the massive stone gong together, and the clash was on. "It's time for you to leave." At Oga's words, the arena gong thundered, and he thrust his hand forward. God-killing magic, Black Thunderball. A sphere of crackling black lightning erupted around Lucian, its jagged arcs hammering him from all sides. The crowd gasped. Some of the cat-adoring girls even covered their mouths in shock. Yet, to everyone's astonishment, each bolt of dark energy splintered against Lucian's form as if striking a mirror, bouncing harmlessly back into the swirling orb. Lucian stood calm, one gauntleted fist raised. Electric blue light flickered across his palm, weaving itself into the ravenous black sphere. He steeled himself, then whispered, "You and I aren't on the same level, not even close to Laxus." With a flick of his wrist, the oppressing mass of energy collapsed in on itself, shrinking until it hovered like a dark marble between his fingers. In an instant, he launched it back toward Oga. The thunderous impact echoed through the silent arena as Lucian's superior mastery over lightning turned the Black Thunderball against its creator. Chapter 365. Magic is powerful, but mankind is frail. Second update. Lucian's heart pounded as he summoned a swirling orb of lightning between his hands. With a fierce cry, he hurled it at Oga, only to see the thunderball rebound as if repelled by an invisible barrier. Oga's eyes went wide. In one fluid motion, he opened his mouth and swallowed the crackling sphere. The cobalt sparks sputtered down his throat, then vanished. "Spare me the speeches," Oga snarled, his voice low and menacing. Black lightning danced across his skin, coiling around his limbs like living serpents. "Let me show you how lightning can even kill a god." With a roar, he lunged forward at blinding speed. Dark bolts of electricity crackled as he concentrated his power into a fist twice the size of Lucian's entire torso. The air itself seemed to warp around that massive hand. God-slaying magic, Thunderbolt. Lucian didn't flinch. Instead, he grounded himself firmly, channeling energy into his tail. It swelled in thickness until it rivaled a stone pillar, its golden fur laced with fierce blue lightning. Then, with a whip-like crack, he lashed out. The electrified tail struck Oga's forearm full force, reverberating through his ironclad gauntlet and halting the Godslayer's devastating blow midair. A tense silence fell over the battlefield as both warriors paused, each gauging the other's next move. The storm of magic had only just begun. Lucian called upon his giant spell, causing his tail to swell to twice its normal size. Crackling arcs of lightning laced its surface, amplifying both its power and speed. Oga's fist cut through the air, barely a centimeter from Lucian's flank, when the electrified tail snapped out. The impact sent Oga flying like a freight train, slamming him hard into the outer stone wall of the arena. He coughed up blood and slid to the ground in a heap. Lucian calmly retracted his tail and slipped his cat's paw behind his back, as if dusting off a minor inconvenience. "I told you we weren't on the same level," he said, his voice cool. "You didn't believe me, so I hadn't even bothered to go all out. You'd do well to admit defeat right now." A stunned hush fell over the crowd. Even the battles raging in the side rings ground to a halt as every spectator turned toward the center. Oga was an S-rank wizard. He had dispatched the mechanical wizard gorilla in a single blow during the preliminaries, and the top guilds regarded him as a powerhouse. What was supposed to be a titanic duel had instead ended before it even began, the gulf between them laid bare by a single, lightning-charged tail strike. The difference in their strength was impossible to ignore. Oga staggered to his feet, blood still trickling from the corner of his mouth. His eyes burned with fury as he spat out a curse. "You've pushed me to my limit. I could kill you right now, and not only that, I'd strip you of your competition status while I'm at it. But I'm not holding back." He pressed both palms together, channeling every last reserve of magic into his hands. His voice trembled with barely contained power. "This is a technique I haven't fully mastered. If you die, don't say I didn't warn you." A crackling black magic circle flared beneath him. In its center, a column of shadowy lightning, thick as a water tank, shot forward like a battering ram. Death God's rune particle cannon. Across the arena, Lucian's gaze narrowed. He flexed his fingers, summoning raw energy to the glinting talon-shaped gauntlet on his right hand. Sparks danced up his arm as he prepared his counter. Ordinary magic, plasma electromagnetic cannon. A brilliant shaft of blue lightning lanced from Lucian's claw, hurtling toward Oga's dark bolt. The two forces collided in midair with an ear-splitting crack, showering the area in arcs of electricity. Lucian's spell held firm, a solid beam of crackling energy, while Oga's thunderous column flickered and faltered at the edges, struggling to maintain its shape. The duel's deadlock lasted barely a heartbeat. Then Lucian unleashed a crackling column of blue lightning that shattered Oga's black thunderbolt midair and slammed into Oga's chest. The force of the impact hurled him screaming through the 3-meter-thick magic stone wall behind him before he finally crumpled to the ground outside the arena. God, the thunder of the gods, lost to ordinary lightning? Oga managed to gasp, tears of disbelief welling in the corners of his eyes. He lay motionless, grievously injured. Lucian stepped forward, calm and unhurried. "Your magic was impressive," he said quietly, "but your strength wasn't enough." Even as Oga's vision blurred and he slid into unconsciousness, Lucian was already preparing his next strike. If the two had shared the same raw power, Oga's infused black thunder would have held the edge. In reality, though, Lucian's own reserve of mana was so vast that even a basic lightning spell overwhelmed his opponent's larger frame, much like a single squad of unarmored soldiers sweeping aside a few in full plate simply by sheer numbers. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the voice booming over the arena speakers, "we have our first victor of the opening round." Lucian's cloak billowed around him as he raised a hand to acknowledge the roar of the crowd. The challenger lay beaten between them and the shattered wall, a clear testament that talent alone wasn't enough. In the game's raw power still reigned supreme. A tense silence fell over the arena before the announcer's voice thundered through the speakers. "Fairy Tail's Lucian defeats Swordbite Tiger's Oga. 10 points to Fairy Tail." The crowd erupted in cheers. "Fairy Tail! Fairy Tail!" Beneath the ring, Germain, battle-scarred veteran and guildmaster of Swordbite Tiger, clenched his fist so tightly that blue veins stood out on his knuckles. His broad shoulders trembled with barely contained fury. He had invested everything in this tournament: reputation, resources, even his own pride. Integrating Swordbite Tiger under his leadership was supposed to herald the dawn of a new era for their guild, and yet here they were, bloodied in the very first match. Germain ground his teeth. "Humiliating," he muttered under his breath. "We were once hailed as the strongest wizarding guild. A single defeat won't define us, but I refuse to let this dampen our spirit." He forced the sneer from his face and straightened his back as Lucian vaulted triumphantly from the ring. "Forget this embarrassment," Germain continued to himself. "Our real competition lies elsewhere. Blue Pegasus, Mermaid Heel, Princess Scale, those are the guilds vying for the top spot. We'll recover our honor soon enough." He glanced toward Olga, who was slumped against the ropes, nursing a bruised rib. "And you, Olga, you'll need to be at your best in the next round. I expect nothing less." With that, Germain turned away and strode up the ramp, already plotting the comeback Swordbite Tiger so desperately needed. The fairy tale banner fluttered overhead, the applause still echoing through the Colosseum. But Germain didn't linger to taste their triumph. His mind was already several matches ahead, where true glory and redemption awaited. "Father, please," Meniba pleaded, her fan fluttering with elegant urgency. Clad in a silken cheongsam, she looked every bit the noblewoman as she addressed Germain. "Give him a chance to atone. Let him be treated." Germain's face was thunderous, but her words gave him pause. After a tense moment, he forcibly calmed himself and gave a reluctant nod. "Fine, Meniba. Do as you wish. Return him for medical attention." Meniba whispered the spell's incantation: "Absolute territory. Spatial transfer." A ripple of energy shivered through the air. In an instant, the seriously wounded, unconscious Olga vanished from the ring and reappeared in the medical bay just beyond the arena's barriers. Lucian drifted down from the ring and perched on Lucky's broad shoulder. He watched the spot where Olga had stood moments before turning to Meniba, the famed sword-biting tiger. "That's an incredibly rare form of space magic," he observed. "To transfer someone through open air, I've never seen anything like it." He thought of his own teleportation ability, apparition, which required him to be in direct physical contact with his target. Remote transfer, he realized, was far beyond his own skill. By the time he finished speaking, the remaining 9 matches in the tournament had concluded. The crowd's cheers faded as medical attendants hurried into the ring and the grandstands began to empty, leaving only the echo of excitement hanging in the evening air. Unlike Lucian's swift victory over Olga, this all-human tournament pairs wizards whose power levels are nearly identical, so no duel can be finished in just a few blows. With every match so evenly balanced, predicting a winner becomes nearly impossible. In one particularly thrilling bout, 2 competitors were so well matched that they traded spell after spell until both were completely drained. When the last of their mana flickered out, the fight was decided by nothing more than raw physical strength, and that unexpected finish had the crowd roaring with approval. Chapter 366, Successive Victories, Update 1. As the first round concluded, the second group entered the arena. No Fairy Tale members were drawn this time, but 2 marquee matchups drew everyone's attention. First up was Hibiki Lightus, the Cyan Pegasus, against Minerva of the Sword-Biting Tiger. Clearly, the royal family had paired them because their skill levels were so evenly matched, and a close fight would be the most entertaining. In the end, however, Minerva's ruthless precision proved overwhelming. Hibiki fought valiantly, but she was decisively outclassed and fell to a swift, brutal defeat. Next came Leo Bastia of Serpent Scales versus Pakas the Drunken Eagle, accompanied by his 4 fierce hounds. Leo, Grey Fullbuster Sr., specializes in modeling magic, summoning ice creatures to do his bidding. Pakas, by contrast, practices a unique form of physical magic that fuses raw strength, martial arts, and sorcery. His blows only grow deadlier once he's had a few drinks. Watching him in action, Lucian found himself wondering if Pakas might be a martial arts master rather than a mage. His movements were so fluid and powerful. Both combatants pushed each other to the limit, pouring every ounce of magic and stamina into the duel. When the final spells faded, neither side could claim victory. It was a hard-fought draw. The score stood deadlocked at 5 apiece when the third-round pairings were called. To everyone's surprise, Fairy Tail's entry was lucky, an underdog in the royal family's eyes, matched against a relatively obscure opponent rather than one of Earth Elf Wheel's famed sorcerers. "Don't worry," Lucian murmured from his perch on Biska's shoulder. He reached out a reassuring hand to Lucky, whose wings fluttered nervously. "He's no match for you." Lucky straightened, recalling how unable she'd been to face Barrick of the Earth Elf Wheel Guild in her earlier life. Barrick was not only one of his guild's strongest wizards, but also notorious for the precision of his rune-bound spells. With Lucian's enhancements, her new wand, her newfound confidence, the odds had shifted dramatically. "I won't disgrace Fairy Tail," she vowed. Drawing her wand, the one Lucian had entrusted to her, she stepped onto her summoning circle. Boom! The gong echoed through the arena, and Barrick's voice rang out with arrogant delight. "Ha! So I get Fairy Tail's wizard at last. Defeat you, and Barrick of Earth Elf Wheel will be a legend." Barrick strode forward, short in stature, but brimming with self-assurance. The guild crest stamped boldly across his cheek. He raised his hands and began weaving the runes that would herald the clash of their magics. All the competitors in the arena knew full well that Fairy Tail's main forces were nowhere to be seen today. Of the 5 representatives from the guild, only the mysterious Black Cat showed any real power. Its 4 human allies were, by comparison, little more than average. The audience, however, knew only what they could see: a formidable cat and the renowned Fairy Tail banner. Naturally, they assumed the other 4 must be equally fearsome. That mistaken belief gave every small guild contestant a golden opportunity. Defeat just one Fairy Tail wizard, no matter where you placed in the tournament, and your name would spread like wildfire. Even a low finish, so long as you'd beaten a Fairy Tail combatant, could secure you dozens of new commissions. A wiry youth named Barrick crept forward, a lewd grin twisting his lips. "I'm going to electrocute you senseless," he snarled. He traced arcane symbols in the air, and blue-white lightning snaked around his arms. Though Barrick was a lightning mage just like Lucian, he was the most ordinary sort. No bells, no whistles, just raw, crackling power. With each pulse of energy, his reflexes sharpened. He moved faster, his form blurring at the edges. In a heartbeat, he closed the gap. Barrick leapt up, seizing a jagged pillar of electricity that arced above the arena floor, then hurled it down in a devastating overhead strike aimed squarely at Lucian. The thunderous rack of energy filled the air as the bolt hurtled toward its target, intent on frying any hope of escape. Lucky drew a steady breath and leveled her wand at Barrick as he hovered in midair. "Wooden form, Sylvan Barrage," she called. A verdant magic circle bloomed at the wand's tip, and dozens of massive wooden spears and axes materialized around Barrick. With a thunderous roar, the weapons hurtled forward, striking him like a pinball and sending him crashing to the arena floor, unconscious and clutching his battered thunder column. The announcer leapt to his feet. What a blow! Fairy Tail's own Lucky Olietta dispatches Barrick of the Earth Spirit Wheel in a single strike, 10 points to the guild. The crowd exploded with cheers for Fairy Tail. Even the other mages waiting ringside exchanged astonished glances. They hadn't expected anyone outside Lucian to display such power in the guild's current state. With the third match concluded, rounds 4 and 5 passed without any Fairy Tail challengers. Now the schedule moved on to the 6th bout. Marcus versus the four-headed hound wizard Nobali. Realizing that the four-headed hound's wizards were outclassed by even the lesser-known small guilds, the tournament organizers decided to raise the bar. For the remaining 3 hounds mages, they summoned opponents drawn from mid-rank, well-established guilds, standard popular wizards whose strength far exceeded that of the hound's usual matchups. Marcus felt the difference immediately. Even with his wand's amplifier boosting his power tenfold, every spell required every ounce of his concentration. The battle teetered on a knife's edge until, at a critical moment, he cast the cloak's armor spell, absorbing his rival's onslaught. Seizing the opening, he unleashed a decisive counterstrike that felled his opponent and secured 10 vital points for the hounds. There were no more contests in Groups 7, 8, or 9. Then came Group 10, and with it, Biska's name finally appeared on the roster. Her adversary would be Jean Leolette of Cyan Pegasus, the guild's celebrated cover girl whose fame was second only to Mirajane's. Jean specialized in summoning magic, conjuring mechanical war engines and heavy artillery to the field. It was beauty against beauty and firepower against firepower. Biska's precise, long-range rifle work pitted against Jean's thunderous, machine-born ordnance. The arena crackled with anticipation. This match promised to be nothing short of spectacular. Lucian watched from the sidelines as Biska squared off against Jenny Leolette, Cyan Pegasus's celebrated cover girl, and an S-class mage to boot. Under ordinary circumstances, Biska would have been outmatched from the first salvo. But Lucian had spent the morning fine-tuning her sniper rifle, channeling magic into each bullet until they carried power rivaling that of an S-class wizard. He'd also rigged up a cloaking barrier for defense, deployed his iron puppet as a decoy, and equipped Biska with an invisibility cloak for a clean, unseen shot. When the dust settled, Biska stood victorious. Jenny Leolette staggered back, disarmed, and yielded the match. Cheers erupted around Lucian. Fairy Tail had just clinched another win, bringing their individual competition total to 40 points. No other guild had gone unbeaten so far. Blue Pegasus, for instance, had already tasted defeat twice, thanks to a streak of bad luck. The rounds moved swiftly past Groups 11 through 14, with no Fairy Tail members called to the field. Finally, in Group 15, a new name flashed on the battle list, Alzak. Lucian frowned when he saw his friend's name matched against a notorious opponent. Still, he kept his expression calm as he leaned closer. "Alzak," he said quietly, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Don't overthink it. You've trained for this. Trust yourself and give it everything you've got. Even if we lose, we still lead in points." Lucian's next opponent was no newcomer but Germain, the veteran head of the Swordbite Tigers. To Lucian, Germain looked like any elderly woe. Izard, but the torrent of magic power radiating from him confirmed he was a top-tier S-class mage. As the Swordbite Tigers' leader, Germain ranked among the very best. Thanks to their recent training, the 4 members of Fairy Tail could now hold their own against ordinary S-class wizards, and with a stroke of luck, might even pull off an upset, much like Biska's unlikely victory over Jenny. But facing one of the elite, that was a challenge well beyond their current reach. Chapter 367, Tell the Guildmaster I'm No Coward, second update. "Guildmaster, with all due respect, I can't let Fairy Tail lose face," Arzak declared, eyes blazing. "We've already secured enough wins to tie with Swordbite Tiger for the top individual score. If I falter now, they'll snatch those last 10 points, and the lead, right out from under us. I promise I'll take them and leave us standing alone at number 1. Fairy Tail currently led the overall standings, but only by a hair. Lucian had vanquished Oga, who'd been cut down by that fatal blade trap, but Oga's 3 successors turned the tide, racking up 30 points between them. Swinging the match in their favor would net Swordbite Tiger a full 40 points, vaulting them ahead for good. Arzak's pride was on the line. He'd even resolved that, if he emerged victorious here, he would seize the moment to propose to Biska. The Guildmaster nodded, his white beard barely moving. Then go all out from the first whistle, no holding back. Meeting that resolute gaze, Lucian fell silent. It was just an exhibition match, after all, hardly a matter of life and death. Still, losing tonight wasn't an option. Arzak's eyes flashed with determination. If this were truly a fight to the death, Germain would still be standing, and Arzak wasn't ready to concede yet. "Come on, Arzak," Biska called, pulling him into a quick, encouraging hug before stepping back. Lucky and Marcus roared their support, and across the stands, Macau and the rest of the Fairy Tail wizards were on their feet, nearly hoarse from cheering. No one had expected the 3 Selekis to perform so brilliantly, racking up 30 precious points for the guild. Until now, they'd feared only Lucian could score, and that Fairy Tail might languish at the bottom of the rankings. Buoyed by the thunderous applause, Arzak strode into the arena, twin pistols gleaming in each hand. On the opposite side, Germain advanced with a cruel grin twisting his lips. "Fairy Tail, the strongest guild, you say?" he sneered. "Once the great demon launches the war, your glory will be dust. From now on, the sword-biting tiger will reign supreme." The 2 combatants faced off and the gong sounded. "Iron monster!" Arzak barked. In an instant, 20 winged steel beasts, creations of Lucian's arcane forge, sprang to life behind him, their metallic wings flashing. With a sharp whistle, he sent them hurtling toward Germain, determined to prove that fairy tales still had teeth. Lucian melted into invisibility beneath his cloak, twin pistols appearing in his hands as he and the steel golem unleashed a hail of gunfire. "These are nothing but parlor tricks," he snarled. "They're channeling some so-called god of war. Let me show them real power." Across the courtyard, Germain's roar thundered against the mortar walls. Muscles bulged beneath his skin as veins of crimson magic snaked over his body, transforming him into a living war idol. With a single, earth-shaking punch, he sent the nearest steel monster flying like a ragdoll. Physical magic, huh? This is on a whole different level. Peering from behind a shattered column, Lucian studied Germain's aura. He stroked his chin thoughtfully. On the surface, it looked like the same body-enhancing magic used by Drunken Eagle's four-headed hound, pure brute strength for the battlefield. But Lucian's keen eyes detected something else. Summoning magic. Germain wasn't just channeling energy, he'd called forth a war spirit to possess his flesh, amplifying every fiber of his being. He'd even inherited the spirit's distinctive combat style, yet his human frame remained unchanged. Lucian grinned beneath his cloak. So that was Germain's secret. Now the real game could begin. It's no easy fight this time. The steel beasts Lucian had forged from the world's magic metal were no match for him in his god of war state. Each construct shattered almost the moment it stepped forward, crushed by his unstoppable strength. Even when Alzak intensified his twin-gun magic, the fiery volleys only nicked Lucian's mere scratches, barely enough to slow him down. If Alzak hadn't been cloaked in shifting invisibility, Lucian would have closed the gap long ago. Their disparity in physical power was simply that great. Still, Alzak fought on. "Fist of the war god," Lucian bellowed, dropping his shoulders as he exhaled in a controlled roar. Alzak unleashed another barrage of enchanted bullets. Anticipating the strike, Lucian darted toward the muzzle flashes and unleashed a torrent of condensed magic punches. Hundreds of arcane fists battered the space where Alzak had fired. Before he could react, the impact rippled through the air. The iron armor curse saved Alzak from real harm, but the assault tore apart the spell's defenses, and for the first time, revealed his true position. Seizing the moment, Lucian closed the distance in an instant. With two powerful grips, he shredded the iron-armored enchantment woven into Alzak's cloak, exposing his hidden foe at last. Lucian's sharp whistle cut through the clamor of soldiers closing in on the lone gunman. The result was inevitable. Germain unleashed a torrent of brutal strikes on Alzak, who had no real way to fight back. Still, Alzak clenched his teeth, refusing to yield. He raised both pistols in a last-ditch effort to defend himself, an act that only fueled Germain's rage. "Weaklings should know their place," Germain sneered. "Kneel and submit, or I'll make sure you never forget this lesson." With that, he yanked Alzak to the ground and stomped down on his right leg, intent on shattering the bone. The tournament's rules forbade death, but dismemberment was fair game. "Alzak!" Biska's cry rang out as tears welled in her eyes. The other fairy-tale mages ground their teeth, anger churning in their chests, but none dared step forward. Just as Germain lifted his boot for the killing blow, a small cat materialized at Alzak's side. "I strongly advise you to reconsider," it purred. In the next heartbeat, Lucian exploded into view. A torrent of raw magic roared outward from his form, and the air itself seemed to congeal with his murderous intent. Germain staggered back, his face draining of blood. In that moment, he felt himself swallowed by a mountain of corpses and wading through a sea of blood, an omen so vivid and terrifying that his hair stood on end. Lucian's survival instinct kicked in before his mind could catch up. He recoiled nearly a dozen paces, heart hammering, then willed himself to steady. The stunned silence that followed was all the warning Germain needed. His own momentum faltered, and he retreated down the ramp. Lucian took a deep breath, turned toward the master of ceremonies in the stands, and called out clearly, "In that case, I concede defeat in Alzak's name." Though Lucian had only felled a handful of foes in this realm, his reputation in Middle-earth was written in the Orcish corpses he'd left behind. Against Germain's level of skill, his mere presence, augmented by that subtle probing of the mind, had been enough to drive the man off his feet. Still, he restrained himself from pushing further. Alzak! At Lucian's concession, Biska and the two other teammates rushed forward, carefully lifting the badly wounded Germain and supporting him off stage. I have a question, the host began, raising his voice so all could hear. But before he continued, a slender figure glided up, the host's daughter, Minerva. With a flick of her ornate fan, she fixed Lucian with a cool stare. Sir Lucian, she said, you just intervened in the match. That's a violation of the rules. Shouldn't you be penalized? Lucian met her gaze without hesitation. The rulebook forbids any third party from using magic to influence the game, he replied evenly. I didn't cast a spell. I only appeared to inform Germain's unconscious teammates that we conceded, nothing more. Lucian's grin grew wider. Really, you just panicked and fell back the moment I charged at you. Germain's face flamed scarlet as he sprang forward, only to be stopped by a firm hand on his shoulder. Minerva slipped between them, eyes flashing. Father, don't let him bait you. The arena's host raised his voice over the murmuring crowd. By the rules, Arzak is unconscious and unable to concede himself. Captain Lucian has compelled his surrender on his behalf. That's a legal victory. 10 points awarded for the sword-bite tiger match. At the edge of the ring, Biska knelt beside the fallen Arzak. With what little strength he had left, he grasped her sleeve and murmured, Tell the President. I'm not a coward. Chapter 368, Team Defense Battle, 3rd Update. Humph. German and Minerva scoffed as they swept off the stage following the host's announcement. Though they had technically won the match, neither of them felt triumphant. German, in particular, was mortified that he'd been rattled by Lucian. Don't worry, Father, Minerva said, forcing a calm smile. In the end, the strongest guild will be ours. She took a deep breath, regaining her composure. Even if Lucian had outmatched her father, he was still only one person. Minerva had clearly noticed that the other 4 competitors had leaned heavily on magical artifacts to boost their combat prowess. Their innate magic, on its own, wasn't especially strong. Surely the more experienced mages in the audience had observed this too, and would have prepared counters for the next bouts. It was highly unlikely that the same unexpected tactics would catch anyone off guard again. After the day's first official match, Fairy Tail and Swordbite Tiger were tied for first place on the leaderboard, each with 40 points. Right behind them sat Snake Princess Scale, holding 35 points. With the standings already so close, the upcoming battles promised to be anything but predictable. Mermaid Belle and Blue Pegasus tied for 3rd place, each earning 30 points. A host of other guilds filled out 4th and 5th places, with 25 and 20 points respectively. Among them the Four Hounds, which enjoys a particularly high profile. In the individual rounds, the organizers quietly matched opponents of roughly equal strength, ensuring that even a popular guild like the Four Hounds couldn't sneak in a lucky upset to inflate its score. Of course, a guild that's uniformly strong will still come away with respectable points. But when it comes to the upcoming team battles and the grand melee, overall power will be the deciding factor. It seems unlikely that weaker wizard guilds will break into the top ranks. The established heavyweights will naturally rise to prominence. The royal family's decision to turn the preliminary matches into a spectacle makes sense for the first round. They wanted big, crowd-pleasing showdowns. But if they keep rigging pairings this way, the audience will catch on fast. Strong guilds will only ever face strong guilds, and the weaker ones will be shoehorned into their own bracket. Even if an underdog posts a surprisingly high score, no one will believe it's legitimate. The small guild scores in the individual competition looked almost as high as Four Hounds, but everyone knew their true strength didn't come close. Lucian didn't waste a second. Heal him, now, he commanded. Arzak lay crumpled on the arena floor, breathing raggedly. Lucian knelt beside him, tracing luminous runes in the air. A soft blue glow filled Arzak's wounds as the ancient restoration magic took hold. This lost art of healing was exceptionally rare. Only a handful of wizards in the world still mastered it. Outside healers still relied on herbal poultices and bandages, but even then, a magician's constitution granted a far quicker recovery. Watching the last crimson streak fade from Arzak's armor, Macau exhaled in relief. He swallowed his awe and said, "President, there's someone else who needs you. Hibiki, The blue Pegasus got badly injured by Minerva of the Sword-Bite Tigers. Could you? Lucian looked up, already closing the distance to where Hibiki trembled. Of course. He placed a gloved hand against her flank, murmuring a different string of runes. A gentle warmth spread through her feathers, knitting torn muscle and sealing bruised tissue until the Pegasus' breathing steadied. As Hibiki rose to her hooves, Macau couldn't hide his wonder. I still can't believe you can do this. Back during the 100 Years' War, our guild brought in a little girl named Wendy. She wielded Sky Dragon Slayer magic, and she could heal too. Such power. It's a tragedy she's sealed away in the fairy ball with the former president. Lucian's gaze was distant for a moment, recalling that loss. Then he offered Hibiki a reassuring smile. We'll bring her back, but for now, you're safe. With the two teammates restored, Fourhound stood ready once more, stronger than their reputation, and united by a magic that refused to die. By the time Lucian returned, Tianlang Island had vanished without a trace. The president of the Blue Pegasus Guild had already mustered his mages and launched their magical starship to scour the surrounding seas. We're allies, he'd said. We must help each other. Lucian had first heard of Blue Pegasus from Macau. Even if he managed to heal their injured member, Xiang, it wouldn't change the tournament's final outcome. Among Blue Pegasus's 5 core wizards, 3 of the men were at the quasi-S level, each almost as strong as a top-ranked mage. Then there was their cover girl, Jenny, who wielded genuine S-rank power. And at the helm stood Yi Ye, whose perfume magic had earned him true S-tier acclaim. In fact, all 29 other guilds had banded together against Fairy Tail, but none stood a chance. Well, none could stand a chance against Lucian, at least. That night, as Lucian led the Fairy Tail mages out of the inn where the Blue Pegasus contingent was still resting, he shook his head in amusement. They really are the most attractive guild in the kingdom, he murmured. Not a single one of them is unattractive. One of his companions chuckled. I heard Blue Pegasus's first requirement isn't strength but appearance. Lucian grinned, tucking his staff under his arm. Well, they certainly passed that test. They slipped into the moonlit street, ready for whatever the next day would bring. If your appearance doesn't pass muster, no matter how strong you are, they simply won't accept you. Marcus flapped his hands excitedly, but Lecky only shook his head, his expression frosty. That's not entirely true. Look at Blue Pegasus's guildmaster, Bob, and their captain, Ichiya. Neither one matches that so-called recruitment standard. It was well known that Blue Pegasus boasted plenty of handsome men and beautiful women, yet Guildmaster Bob was a portly cross-dresser with a peculiar voice, and Captain Ichiya was notoriously short and stout. Macau and Wakaba, the 2 most veteran wizards of Fairy Tail, both chuckled at the puzzled looks on Marcus and Lecky's faces. You wouldn't believe it, Macau explained, but before he left our guild, Bob was actually voted the most handsome man in Fairy Tail. And Ichiya, there's more to him than meets the eye. Our former guildmaster once told me that Xiang, Ivan, and Leon all call him sensei. They admire and respect him deeply. The chatter died down as the group continued down the cobblestone street, laughter and stories echoing in the evening air. Soon they arrived at the small hotel they'd rented for the night, its warm lamplight spilling out onto the sidewalk. Macau and Wakaba hauled the luggage up to the 2nd floor, giving Lucian a nod before disappearing down the hallway. Lucian gripped his teammates' hands in a quick, silent circle of solidarity. Then, with a familiar swirl of golden light, he teleported the 5 of them back to their dormitory. They arrived just as the moon was sinking, Yu's hearts thumping with anticipation. By dawn, the 2nd team battle of the official competition would begin, and Fairy Tail's pride would be on the line. Pumpkin Man strode onto the platform and laid out the rules once more. Welcome to today's team defense battle. Here's how it works. From the preliminaries and individual trials, we've identified our 6 champion guilds. The remaining 24 guilds are then drawn into 6 groups of 4. Each group will challenge 1 champion guild, taking turns in one-on-one duels. Every time you defeat a champion guild member, you earn 10 points. Should you defeat 5 members in succession, you'll collect 50 points, and you'll usurp the champion's seat, becoming the new defending guild. From that point on, every challenger you defeat adds 3 points to your tally. If you hold off all 4 challenging guilds, 20 opponents in total, you'll secure the maximum 60 points. A hush fell over the arena. Most wizards and spectators had never seen this format before. They'd expected a simple team versus team gauntlet. Now that the mechanics were clear, the crowd buzzed with renewed anticipation. Lucian stood near the back, absorbing every detail. The challenge was laid bare, and he was more than ready. Weak guilds already understand that first place is beyond their reach. What they can aim for, however, is the chance to take down one or two renowned guild mages in the arena and consume their power, a feat that would dramatically boost their reputation. Stronger guilds, on the other hand, have a different strategy. By performing well in these team battles, they can rack up enough points to close the gap left by weaker individual showings. For spectators, this new format is as thrilling as it is unpredictable, injecting fresh excitement into the competition. Chapter 369, All of You, Unite, Update 1. Excellent. Lucian nodded as he reviewed the rules for the team defense battle. This round wasn't about individual prowess, it was the ultimate test of a guild's combined strength. No matter what, his guild was guaranteed at least 60 points. In fact, Lucian thought it might even be strategically advantageous not to be the champion. Here's how the scoring worked. The 5 members of the champion guild each earned 10 points for a total of 50, plus an automatic 10-point bonus for taking the title, 60 points in all. Then the 3 challenger guilds were slotted in behind them, each awarded 15 points, which added up to 45 more. 60 plus 45, that's 105 points, nearly double what the champions could claim. Of course, the organizers wouldn't relegate Lucian's guild to the challengers after their dominant showings in both the preliminaries and the individual events. Their performance thus far made their path clear. They would be the champion guild, maximum 60 points. True, if they'd wanted to slip into the challengers bracket, they'd have had to feign weakness in earlier matches, but that wasn't Lucian's style. He had no interest in playing second fiddle or manipulating his way to extra points. He wanted a clean win, outright and undisputed. With that settled, he lifted his head and met his teammates' eyes. Let's show them what we're made of. A ripple of determination passed through the room. The team defense battle was about to begin, and Lucian's guild was ready. Lucian paced beneath the cavernous ceiling of the arena, fire burning in his chest. He wasn't about holding Fairy Tail back. He intended to unleash its full power and prove, once and for all, that they were the strongest. With just one cat at his side, he'd shatter every challenger's confidence. The announcer, an imposing figure in a pumpkin-orange robe, raised his voice above the murmuring crowd. The 6 defending guilds are Fairy Tail, Swordbite Tiger, Mermaid Heel, Snake Princess Scale, Four-Headed Hounds, and Blue Pegasus. No sooner had he finished than a swirl of magical light sprang to life on the projection screen overhead. The runic patterns shifted, displaying each champion guild's randomly assigned opponent among the 4 challenger factions. Excitement crackled through the air. Now came the critical phase, the strategy briefings. Each champion guild slipped away to a nearby war room, bathed in the soft glow of floating lanterns. In team combat, raw magic alone wouldn't win the day. Coordination would. Who would charge in first? Whose spells would be best for restraining the enemy? How would they divide up scoring opportunities, set up defenses, or execute combo attacks? Every decision had to be flawless. If Fairy Tail hoped to defend its title, their plans needed to be as sharp as their spells. The defending guild's magicians were undeniably powerful, but they faced opponents 4 times their number, and those contenders weren't pushovers. Even someone of Jura's caliber, a rank 10 saint, had finite reserves of mana. The moment he overextended himself with back-to-back spells, his power would ebb, and his effectiveness in battle would plummet. On the challenger's side, deciding whether to step into the arena first or last was a strategic gamble. Going first could earn you early points and momentum, but reserving your turn until the end let you capitalize on a weakened opponent. A confident guild might charge in to knock out the champions and claim their title outright. A more cautious one could bide its time, let others exhaust the defending guild, then swoop in to reap the rewards. Lucian and his 4 teammates gathered for a rapid-fire strategy session. It lasted less than a minute. Lucian had already crystallized his plan. With a curt nod, they dispersed, each member clear on their role and ready to turn their carefully honed tactics into victory. "Our strategy couldn't be simpler," Lucian announced. "I'll go first, take them out one by one, and secure all 60 points." "President," one of the council members ventured, voice tinged with concern, "isn't that a little reckless?" The other three exchanged uneasy glances. As the defending guild, they had always kept their ace wizard, Lucian, in reserve. Sending him in first would be virtually impossible tactically. Facing 20 elite wizards from 4 opposing guilds in a row, even if Lucian prevailed, he'd be utterly spent. More critically, he'd reveal every spell and trick in his repertoire, giving their rivals a roadmap to counter him in the team battle. Their standard protocol was clear: deploy 4 fighters up front. If they held the line, Lucian could remain fresh. If they fell, it would be too late to save them anyway. And even if the challengers racked up 40 points, it wouldn't tip the scales. Those points would be spread across 4 teams and pose no real threat. With Lucian's guarantee of 60 at the end, victory was all but assured. He met their worried stares with a confident grin. "I want it simple and unforgettable for the crowd. Besides, a dramatic win like this will only boost the guild's reputation and bring in more commissions." "Don't worry, I've got this," Lucian said, his voice steady with confidence. Once he'd finalized the battle plan, Lucian and his 4 teammates each strode onto a designated magic ring, ready for the first challenge. 20 minutes later, the reigning champion guilds claimed the other 5 platforms, while the assembled challengers conferred below on who would step up first. Dong, the resonant gong, silenced the crowd. "The team defense round begins now. Challengers, please ascend to the platforms," the announcer's high voice rang out. A wave of cheers rolled across the arena. "We, the Boar's Tusk, challenge you," called a proud voice. 5 wizards, the Boar's Tusk Guild, marched onto the platform where Lucian's team stood guard. They considered themselves fortunate to be matched against Fairy Tail, the current champions. Although they knew toppling Fairy Tail would be nearly impossible, only the team's feline leader wielded true arcane talent. The other 4 relied heavily on enchanted props to boost their power. Having observed Fairy Tail's magic items in earlier rounds, they at least understood the nature of their opponent's arsenal, and were ready to see if that knowledge would be enough. Chapter 8: Wings of Challenge. The grand arena thrummed with anticipation as the 6 champion guilds prepared for the opening round. Each victory awarded 10 points, 30 points for defeating 3 opponents, 40 for 4. Any fewer, and you'd risk falling behind. Any more, and you'd earn glory. But every guild knew better than to face the Phantom Cat, a lone swordsman whose raw magical power and refusal to use enchanted gear had even driven the Sword-Bite Tiger's leader into retreat. Tonight, the Boar's Tusk Guild executed a cautious strategy. They'd let their rivals send out their first combatant, then unleash their own restraining specialist to neutralize that target. With one enemy bound, the rest would fall easily. 3 wins would secure 30 points and keep them safely ahead of elimination. None dared risk confronting the Phantom Cat. As the horn sounded, the crowd's roar swelled. Across the arena, 5 guild banners fluttered. The Boar's Tusk team leaned forward, eyes fixed on the center dais, where one champion from each guild would appear. They anticipated a minor skirmisher, a warm-up fighter, from their chief rival, Fairy Tail. Then they'd strike. But what stepped onto the platform was no mere novice. A hush fell. The air crackled as Lucian, leader of the Fairy Tail Guild, unfolded immense, iridescent wings from his back. Moonlight caught the polished edges of his feathers, casting prismatic sparks around him. His cloak billowed, revealing runic sigils that glowed with raw mana. "No, this can't be," whispered Bren, Boar's Tusk's second-in-command, mouth agape. His 4 companions stared in shock. They had expected to face a mid-level adversary, someone they could easily restrain. Instead, their rival's leader had arrived first. From the surrounding guild sections came a collective gasp. The Phantom Cat himself leaned forward, curiosity flickering in his crystalline eyes. Even the Sword-Bite Tiger's champions, long accustomed to raw power, exchanged uneasy looks. Lucian flexed his fingers, and with a confident tilt of his head, signaled that the duel had begun. In that instant, Boar's Tusk realized their entire plan had unraveled. They had gambled on a quick bind-and-beat tactic. Now they faced the arena's most formidable warrior, and their only hope of 30 safe points was slipping away. Silence reigned, broken only by the thunder of Lucian's wings as he floated down to center stage, challenge blazing in his gaze. The first round, it seemed, was already won. They hadn't expected Fairy Tail to play its ace so early. Most teams save their trump card for the finale. Down below the arena, the Crocodile Skin Guild members were already grinning from ear to ear. They were the last challengers scheduled to fight here. If the first 3 teams had managed to defeat Fairy Tail's master, Crocodile Skin could swoop in, earn the full 40 points, and claim the championship for themselves. Lucian dropped into the ring and called out, "No need to come one at a time. That's too slow. All 5 of you, attack together." By the official rules, the guild's 5 members were supposed to face him in single combat, one after another. Each time Lucian fell, the next contestant would step up, and every victory they scored would net them 10 points, up to a total of 50 if they defeated all 5. But Lucian saw no point in such formalities. Taking on all 5 opponents at once was just as easy for him as facing them one by one. Chapter 370. Instant Kill. Instant Kill. Instant Kill. Second update. You're far too arrogant. At Lucian's words, the leader of the Bortusk clan flared with excitement. If all 5 of them attacked in unison, victory would finally be within their grasp. 2 of their number were nearly S rank in strength. The other 3, though a notch below, were battle-hardened veterans. Wizards preferred team-based missions for precisely this reason. When different magics combined flawlessly, the result was far greater than the sum of its parts. With perfect coordination, they could challenge not just average S-rank foes, but even the elite. "Move out." Fearing Lucian might back down, the leader barked the order. In an instant, his squad formed a tight ring, isolating Lucian at its center in a textbook encirclement. Shift form, Earth Dragon Spear. Runes blazed around the leader's hand, and a massive, earthen yellow spear materialized, humming with raw, unstoppable power. Lucian, the Boar's Tusk's preeminent wizard, now summoned the Earth Dragon Spear, a legendary top-tier magic weapon he'd perfected with 2 decades' worth of mission rewards. He'd kept it hidden through countless battles, but with its blessing, his power rivaled that of an S-rank mage. Chanting the Earth Clash Thunderspell to neutralize his foe's lightning magic, Lucian vanished in a blur and reappeared behind him. With unerring precision, he thrust the spear point into his opponent's back, and at the same instant, the weapon erupted into dozens of razor-sharp earthen cones that ripped into him. From their seats in the arena, the other wizards gasped in astonishment. Never before had the Boar's Tusk champion revealed his Earth Dragon Spear so early in the match. In earlier one-on-one duels, many competitors had deliberately held back their ultimate weapons, saving them for the grandstand-worthy climax. But Lucian's decisive move left no doubt where his confidence lay. Lucian barely had time to lift a finger in defense against the twine Earth Dragon spears and the spiraling earth cones before another mage, identified by the boar tusk crest on his staff, smacked his hands into the ground. In an instant, jagged ice erupted around Lucian's feet, encasing him in a frigid tomb. Charm Magic, Bewitch. Simultaneously, a European-styled enchantress in flowing silks blew a mocking kiss. A shimmering haze washed over Lucian's mind, disrupting his focus with dizzying allure. Ring Magic, Fire Serpent's Coil. Wind Magic, Stormblade. Blasts of searing flame and razor-edged wind slashed at Lucian's frozen shell, while the original pair of earth elemental casters pressed their spears, crackling with thunderous energy, against his chest. The 5-way assault was flawless in execution. Wizards and onlookers alike murmured in awe and a touch of fear. Lucian's reputation for strength was well-deserved, but he'd clearly underestimated the power of a coordinated strike. Yet as the final gale of fire and wind tore at the ice, Lucian's frame shuddered, and then, with a low roar of willpower, he shattered his prison. Cracks spidered through the ice in an instant. The ice coffin proved no match for his raw physical might. Freed, Lucian stood unbowed, every muscle tensed for the next move. Lucian whipped his head around to face the towering European sorceress. In an instant, he wove his mind power into a mental assault, seizing control of her will. With every new clone he summoned, his mana swelled, and with it, his psychic prowess skyrocketed. No longer stationed at second-tier telepathy, he had climbed to the 3rd level. Bolstered by this newfound strength and his mind barrier technique, the sorceress's glamour spells fizzled harmlessly against his defenses. Only a Saint-tier enchanter, ranked 10th, might still pose a threat. Simultaneously, Lucian unleashed his mastery of metal, magnetizing the Earth Dragon spear lodged behind him. It tore free from the leader wizard's grasp and rocketed into the Archmage's back with the force of thousands of tons. The blow sent him crashing into the arena wall, dazed and unconscious. As the leader wizard fell, the jagged columns of earth magic he'd conjured collapsed and scattered, leaving Lucian standing alone in the sudden, ringing silence. Lucian leapt into the air, summoning the legendary Earth Dragon Spear. In a single fluid motion, he swept the spear before him, effortlessly dispersing the Fire Serpent and Wind Blade spells hurtling his way. Then, still airborne, he spun about the ring, striking the remaining 4 wizards each on the back of the head. One by one, they crumpled, unconscious, and all in less than a second, from the moment Lucian shattered that ice wall to the final challenger's collapse. Next guild. A collective gasp ran through the assembled mages below the arena. Even the representatives of the 5 Grandmaster guilds, who hadn't yet taken the ring, stared in stunned silence. That siege attack they'd just witnessed was supposed to be among the most devastating in existence. It had even forced Saint Tanjura to admit he couldn't break it offhand. Yet Lucian had dismantled it in an instant, without unleashing the thunder magic that had felled Oga earlier. Worse, no one saw him cast a spell. The Earth Dragon Spear had obeyed him as though it were an extension of his own body, with no visible magic circle or incantation at all. How could any opponent defend against that? Fairy Tail has defeated all 5 challengers at once, earning 15 points. "Let's hear it for them," someone shouted, and the arena immediately erupted in thunderous applause and chants. "Fairy Tail! Fairy Tail! Fairy Tail!" No one could believe what they'd just witnessed. A single wizard had dismantled an entire guild in seconds. Even those who'd never heard of Lucian recognized raw power when they saw it. "He hardly looks winded," a veteran whispered. "He's barely used any magic." On the opposite side of the stage, the leader of the Monster Liver Magic Guild swallowed hard and forced a nod to his trembling teammates. They were 5 strong, but none dared doubt their captain's resolve. "Remember who we are," their leader barked, voice wavering. "We are Monster Liver Magic Guild. Dragon Slayer magic, roar of the wood flame dragon," he roared, summoning a glowing magic circle at his feet. Brilliant tricolored flames erupted, filling the arena with blistering heat. The 5 challengers charged forward, only to be obliterated instantly by a counterwave of raw arcane energy from Lucian. In a heartbeat, they lay motionless on the scorched stage. Lucian flicked his feline paw dismissively and called out, "No thanks, next guild." In that instant, the crowd understood the true gulf of power. It was the same awe that had greeted the Black Dragon's roar, only this time, the fearsome force stood in the form of a sleek, confident cat. Lucian's roar swept across the arena like a living inferno, so powerful that none of the hunters, not even the highest-ranked guild wizards short of S-level, could withstand it. He raised his staff, eyes burning with feral intensity. "Dragon Slayer magic, roar of the wood flame dragon." A wave of emerald and gold fire erupted from his throat, engulfing the first team of mages before they even had time to cast a single protection spell. Their screams were cut brutally short. Without pausing for breath, Lucian unleashed the attack 3 more times in rapid succession. Each roar bore down on a new guild squad, reducing them to ash in an instant. 4 teams fell, one after another, before the crowd had even recovered from the first blast. Lucian never so much as shifted his stance. He stood perfectly still, his hair and robes undisturbed by the inferno he commanded. All around him, the scorched battlefield crackled with residual flames. The scoreboard blinked upward, 60 points. In the other 5 arenas, the opening challengers were still locked in combat, struggling to land a blow against equally skilled opponents. But here, Lucian had already dispatched 4 guild contingents, demonstrating a level of Poe where that left everyone watching breathless. Chapter 371, Eclipse Gate, 3rd Update. The Holy 10, no question about it. Lucian led his team into the arena, each step measured and unhurried. Behind him marched Kagura of Mermaid Heel, Ichiya of Blue Pegasus, and Germain and Minerva of Saber Tiger. Their faces were set in solemn determination. The opening bout had already been a blur of raw power, but when the three opponents unleashed their tricolor flames in the next 3 matches, every onlooker felt a jolt of dread. Even from across the ring, the sheer intensity radiating from Lucian seemed almost too great to bear. "He's definitely channeling Holy Ten's strength," murmured Leo of Snake Princess Scale, leaning closer to Jura, the only wizard here who truly belonged to that elite circle. Jura closed his eyes and pressed his palms together. As the newest member of the Holy Ten, he'd studied the others exhaustively. He knew better than most how terrifying their power could be, especially the 4 heavenly kings of Ishgard, 4 mages whose inhuman prowess was the stuff of legend. Even the 4th-ranked king among them could rout the 6 who followed. "This isn't ordinary Holy Ten power," Jura said at last, voice low. "Lucian's playing on a whole different level, one that might even eclipse what our president expected." Leo and the others exchanged grave looks. In that charged silence, they all understood. Lucian's mastery wasn't just formidable, it was reshaping the very boundaries of magical combat. The most formidable of them all is Serena, ranked number 1 among the gods and a Dragon Slayer mage of legendary renown. Armed with 8 Dragon Slayer crystals, she wields every form of Dragon Slayer magic, her power rivaling that of the deities themselves. When Lucian unleashed his own Dragon Slayer spell just now, it felt as though he were sparring with God Serena in person. If Lucian's strength truly matches that of Ishgar's 4 Saint Kings, then even Serena might struggle to take first place this time around. "Don't get ahead of yourself," Shirley Brandy piped up. The pink-haired puppet mage flashed a confident grin and punched her palm. "He is strong, but we've got talent too." She glanced at Jura, another saint, and then at Leo, whose prowess nearly equaled that of the 4 guild leaders. "Together, our guild's power even outstrips fairy tales." Germain, master of the sword-biting tiger style, ground his teeth. A mere cat packing this much strength. His voice trembled with a mix of anger and envy. His daughter Minerva's eyes gleamed icily. "He may be one of the 10 saints, but he's brawn without brains. Let's see how far raw strength alone will carry him." "I've got plenty of tactics lined up for tomorrow's big match," Minerva said with a confident smirk. "No one's going to strip away my trump card." German relaxed, a relieved smile spreading across his face. But Minerva's eyes flashed with contempt as she added, "You think you'll play the cat who hides its claws until the final day and then stun everyone? Cute, but cats may have claws, they don't have brains." "Since you already have a plan," German said, wrapping an arm around Minerva's shoulders, "you truly deserve all the time I've invested in you." Minerva nodded, though a shadow crossed her features. "By revealing the Holy Ten's power today, our opponents are on high alert. With just a little guidance from us tomorrow, they'll pour every ounce of their strength into taking it down first. It might handle 5 wizards at once, maybe even 10, but 50? 100? Not a chance." From atop the raised platform, Lucian watched the exchange with cold interest. When the bell rang, he stepped down into the arena amidst the fearful glances of the gathered wizards and the roar of the crowd. Tugging his cloak tighter, he cast a quick, measured glance toward the grand palace beyond the stadium, and frowned. He knew the real battle was only just beginning. Lucian hadn't paid it much mind at first, but the moment he released his dragon-slaying spell, he sensed something strange. His magic was being pulled inexorably toward the royal palace by an unseen force. Later, after his team had dispatched the 4 challenger guilds, Lucian reclined against Lecky's shoulder and reached out with his senses once more. To his astonishment, it wasn't just his own mana being drawn away. Every ounce of magic let loose in the arena was being funneled toward the palace. Whatever was there was voraciously consuming spell energy. He made up his mind. Tonight, he would slip away and see what was happening behind the palace walls. If the crown was plotting something, he couldn't afford to be blindsided. Lucian knew his power was impressive, but not unmatched. The Black Dragon, the 5 Divine Dragons, Ishgar's 4 Heavenly Kings, without testing their mettle in combat, he had no idea how they compared. It would be wise to approach this mystery with care. A day passed, and the 3rd team defense battle concluded. Fairy Tale still sat comfortably atop the leaderboard, alongside Swordbite Tiger, which remained locked in first place on its own rankings. Yet Lucian's thoughts were already turning to the night ahead and the secrets waiting in the palace shadows. Even though their match had lasted longer than the showdown with Fairy Tale, Lucian's guild still swept through every challenger and scored a perfect 60 points. Of the 5 champion guilds, 4 finished with the same flawless tally. Only the Fourhounds, their mana spent to the last drop, fell to their final opponents and limped in with just 45 points. The contest laid bare for every spectator the yawning gulf between the realm's elite mages and those of ordinary standing. Long after the courtyard torches had dimmed and the castle wards fell silent, Lucian slipped out of the dormitory. He rose into the night sky, moving like a shadow toward the royal palace. All day, he'd been chasing a faint trail of magic absorption, an energy signature he suspected led to something hidden deep within the palace walls. Under cover of darkness, he slipped past dozing sentries and patrols until he reached the ancient basement beneath the throne. There, he found it. A massive stone door carved with the 12 golden sigils of the star spirits. Lucian hovered before the barrier, heart quickening, as his keen eyes traced the intricate runes and interlocking glyphs. As a master alchemist, trained in the arcane arts of Fairy Tale and ever in pursuit of grand designs, he'd studied every known text on refining magic airships, dreaming of building his own floating city in the Marvel realm. Yet he had never encountered enchantment so complex, so beautifully wrought, as those guarding this portal. A low hum resonated through the air, and the golden sigils flared in response to his presence. Lucian's pulse raced with anticipation. Beyond this door lay the secret he'd risked everything to uncover. With a steadying breath, he reached out to test the seal, ready to breach whatever lay beyond and claim the power that awaited him. Lucian stood before the gate, taking in every detail at a glance. The door was forged from an extraordinarily rare, magically infused metal, far beyond anything he'd ever encountered in alchemical treatises, and inlaid with complex transmutation runes that defied his previous studies. Yet it was the subtle traces of star spirit magic and advanced chronomancy that truly caught his eye. Star spirit magic, unique to this world, could not be replicated elsewhere. Though Lucian's own knowledge of it was limited, the 12 golden sigils arranged across the door unmistakably represented the 12 celestial spirits. And woven beneath those motifs were strands of time magic so sophisticated that only a scholar of temporality could recognize them. He sank to one knee on the cold stone floor, turning the puzzle over in his mind. Why would the royal family enlist the great demon sect's martial adepts to recharge this door's power? Such a colossal, secretive undertaking could only have originated with the king himself. If he could approach the monarch undetected and discreetly probe his memories, the truth would surely emerge. And if the king himself proved ignorant of the scheme, Lucian would not hesitate to delve into the recollections of queens, princesses, even high ministers, until he uncovered whoever held the key to this grand design. Lucian's heart pounded as he traced the last rune in the air. He was about to unleash the tracking spell that would pinpoint the king's whereabouts when a ring of arcane light flared at his feet, and his illusion ward shattered in an instant. Detected. The single hollow word echoed in his mind, just as the clatter of armored boots closed in from every direction. Lucian risked a glance upward, and froze. There, high above the city walls, hovered a perfect, unblinking magic eye. He'd felt no disturbance in his wards, no whisper of surveillance. Clearly, the Magic Development Bureau had outdone itself with this covert sentinel. Such artistry meant his hiding place was already compromised. Lucian drew a steadying breath. If something exists, it will be found, whether lurking in shadow or blazing in the open. He clenched his staff tighter, steeling himself for what came next. There was no turning back. Chapter 372, I Can Torture You Without Magic. Who do you think you are? Some kind of human cat, sneaking into the palace on your own? A phalanx of silver-armored knights surrounded Lucian, their swords leveled and glinting in the torchlight. At their head stood a white knight whose stern gaze shifted to shock the instant he recognized Lucian. It can't be you. Rumors of Lucian's feats had already reached the Kingdom Intelligence Department. The man, known in guild circles as a leading fairy tale mage, had single-handedly crushed 5 rival guilds in a single day. Whispers said his power rivaled even the revered Holy Ten. Though few dared approach him, here he stood, unbowed and calm. "Good evening," Lucian replied, offering a polite nod and lifting a paw-gloved hand in greeting rather than reaching for his magic staff. The White Knight blinked, then forced a courteous smile. "Forgive my harsh welcome. I am Captain Arcadios, commander of the Sakura Holy Knights. It is my duty to safeguard these corridors. May I ask, what brings you here, Mr. Lucian? This wing is strictly off-limits to the public. I must insist you depart at once." Behind Captain Arcadios, the knights exchanged uneasy glances, their eyes darting toward a sealed door rumored to lead down to the palace's forbidden basement. Any other mage who dared this far, anyone seeking even a glimpse of the Eclipse Gate, would already be shackled and imprisoned. Yet Lucian remained unperturbed, his pale eyes studying the captive hush that fell among them. "Believe me, Captain," Lucian said softly, "I have my reasons for being here, but I assure you I mean no harm to the palace or its secrets." Silence stretched as Arcadios weighed his options. Finally, he dipped his head with a measured courtesy. "Very well, Mr. Lucian. For now, I will trust your word. But mark my warning, linger too long, and I will have no choice but to detain you." With that, the knights parted, leaving a narrow passage. Lucian offered a final nod, stepping forward under their watchful eyes, toward the mysteries hidden in the dark heart of the palace. Lucian's pulse quickened. The Eclipse Gate project was the kingdom's most closely guarded secret, and it had to stay that way. Yet before him stood this mysterious cat, wielding power on par with a 10th-tier saint. Lucian didn't want to fight unless absolutely necessary, and besides, the cat might not even know what the Eclipse Gate was or why it existed. "That won't work," Lucian said, his whiskers twitching with controlled irritation. "Earlier at the conference hall, I noticed something drawing off the magic we were releasing in our duel. I never realized it was actually a gateway. I have the right to know why your royal family is sponsoring this so-called Great Demon Show." He lifted his paw and pointed at the ornate door tucked behind the stage. "If you refuse to explain, I'll go public with everything we've uncovered. By dawn, the palace will be swarming with sorcerers demanding answers." Now that he'd unraveled the conspiracy, exposing how the royal family had used Great Demon Director Wu as their pawn, Lucian held the upper hand. He had nothing left to lose. It was the crown that should be trembling. Lucian's eyes narrowed as Arcadios waved a hand dismissively. "Now that you know the truth, there's nothing you can do about it." "Seize him," Arcadios commanded. Without hesitation, the royal soldiers slung aside their spears and surged forward. Lucian gave a wry smile and stepped back, easily keeping out of their reach. "You really think a dozen-foot soldiers can catch me?" Arcadios met his gaze coolly. "I didn't want to make waves. If you'd stayed silent, forgotten what you saw, you'd be free to leave, and no one would suspect a thing tomorrow. But since you've uncovered the gate's secret, that it absorbs magic at its very core, I have no choice but to detain you." He paused, grinning. "Although," he added, "you might want to refrain from using any spells right now." Lucian stiffened. Arcadios' smile grew broader. "This entire city's magic converges on the Eclipse Gate. Its absorption field is strongest here, in the plaza. Any mage who tries to draw on their power will find their mana leached away instantly, until they're as good as powerless." The guards advanced in tighter formation, blades raised. Lucian weighed his options, knowing that any spark of magic would only play into Arcadios' hands. He steeled himself for the confrontation to come, and prayed he could outwit them before it was too late. Lucian might rank among the Holy Ten in raw power, but without magic, he was as powerless as any ordinary cat. Arcadios let out a low chuckle. "So this door is your trump card? You think I could sense its magic drain in the arena but miss it here?" Lucian simply shook his head. As a master alchemist, he'd already uncovered the Eclipse Gate's hidden flaw during his research. Arcadios' trick might fool lesser spellcasters, but it posed no real threat to him. First, Lucian's very blood was infused with wizard's essence, continuously generating mana that the gate couldn't touch. Second, and more importantly, His years of meditation had granted him absolute control over his magical flow, ensuring not a single spark of energy ever slipped away to be devoured. Finally, even in the unlikely event his magic reserves ran dry, he still commanded formidable supernatural abilities. Level 5 electrical discharge reminiscent of Misaka Mikoto, Level 3 magnetic manipulation rivaling Magneto, and Level 3 psychic talent. No door, eclipsing or otherwise, could contain him. Even without tapping into any special abilities, Lucian's current physical fitness alone could overwhelm every kingdom guard in the vicinity. Imagine the combined strength of countless clones condensed into a kitten no larger than your palm. That's how terrifyingly powerful this small creature's body would be. It's like a human crushing an ant underfoot, while that same ant could lift 400 times its own weight. If the ant suddenly had human strength, it would be far easier for it to kill us than for us to squash it. 1, 2, 3. Lucian didn't utter a spell. Relying solely on his raw speed, he sprang from shoulder to shoulder among the kingdom's soldiers. He moved so swiftly their eyes only caught a blur, and with each landing his tail whipped against the back of a guard's head. By the time he'd touched every man, the entire squad lay unconscious in a heap. See, even without magic, I can still make you suffer. Arkadios drew his sword, leveling the blade at Lucian. He hadn't expected his opponent to be so overwhelmingly strong, without a single spell to back him up. It seems there's nothing left to do but face him myself, Arkadios muttered, bracing for the fight ahead. Lucian, leader of the kingdom's Sakura Holy Knights, smiled to himself. Few could match his blade, and fewer still could stand against his magic. He'd discovered long ago how to shield his spells from the siphoning pull of the Eclipse Gate, so Arkadios' greatest advantage was neutralized. Wings of iridescent light blossomed from Lucian's shoulders as he launched himself into the air and soared toward the gate. Arkadios, sword sheathing with a metallic click, looked up at him gravely. "There's no need to fight," he called. "We can settle this with words." Lucian chuckled. "If you truly believed words would sway me, you'd have walked away long ago." In a heartbeat, he dropped onto Arkadios' shoulders and pressed a gloved hand against the other knight's head, steadying himself with feline grace. "I'll see your plan for myself," he said, eyes glinting. Below them, the Eclipse Gate pulsed ominously, and neither man was about to back down. Lucian frowned in surprise. "So your goal is to kill Jalal and rewrite history?" He glanced at Arkadios, who nodded gravely. From Arkadios' memories, Lucian now understood the kingdom's true motive for hosting the Grand Magic Martial Arts Tournament. By drawing in vast stores of magical power, they intended to open the fabled Eclipse Gate on the next lunar eclipse, 7 Aris from now, and travel back in time. The human world and the celestial realm obey different laws of temporality. With enough collected mana, a celestial wizard wielding all 12 golden keys can tap into the celestial plane's time currents and unlock the Eclipse Gate. Once opened, it would bridge eras, allowing them to undo past wrongs or unleash a very different future. Chapter 373, Lucian the Robber Cat, Second Update. The true spark of this calamity can be traced back to the disappearance of Fairy Tail's elite members on Tenru Island. Once the kingdom's strongest guild, Fairy Tail proved powerless against the onslaught of the Black Dragon and was utterly annihilated. The kingdom trembled at the thought. If even Fairy Tail could not hold the beast at bay, what hope remained for the realm itself? In a frantic bid for answers, the royal archivists scoured every surviving scroll and codex for clues to the dragon's origin. Their search led them to obscure chronicles of the long-forgotten Dragon King festival, which ominously foretold a black dragon's rise. Further scrutiny pointed them toward a single architect of such dark power, the Mage Zeref. After all, only Zeref, creator of countless demons, could have forged a monster of such scale and malice. Fearing for the future of humanity, the crown mobilized its greatest assets. Under the leadership of the princess, and bolstered by the mighty warrior Arkadios, they conceived the Eclipse Gate Plan, a bold, kingdom-wide initiative designed to trap or vanquish the Black Dragon before it could unleash further devastation. And so, with hope riding on their courage, the realm prepared to face its darkest hour. Chapter 12, The Eclipse Gate. Lucian sat at the edge of the War Council's oaken table, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm. Before him hovered a spectral diagram of the Eclipse Gate, an ancient portal handed down through generations of the kingdom's greatest archmages. Defense Minister Datton, his stern features cast in torchlight, rose to address the assembly. "The plan is straightforward," Dayton began, voice echoing in the vaulted chamber. "We will channel the combined power of our great magicians to open the Eclipse Gate and travel 7 years into the past before Zareth ever embraced darkness. There, we will slay him and prevent the birth of the Black Dragon. If we succeed, the coming cataclysm will be erased from history." A murmur rippled through the council. Lucian's heart thumped against his ribs. He had pledged his life to serve this kingdom, but to reach into time itself? The very notion left him breathless. Datton's eyes narrowed. "I know the risks. Altering the past could unravel our own existence, erase our kingdom from the tapestry of history." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Yet we have no other hope." Arlena of the Silver Circle, the realm's lead archmage, stepped forward. Her robes shimmered with latent energy. Thanks to Lucian's intervention, the ritual chamber beneath the citadel is fully attuned to the gate's ley lines. From this perspective, what he accomplished was indispensable. It hastened our mana collection, ensuring we have the power to breach time itself. Lucian recalled the hidden cavern, its walls etched with runes that pulsed under his touch. He'd guided the mages in recalibrating the chamber's resonance, synchronizing their efforts with the gate's dormant seals. Without that spark, the plan would falter. Arlena continued, voice softening. "The martial mana performance is complete. Our great magicians stand ready to pour their life essence into the gate. In a matter of hours, we will step across 7 years into a past brimming with uncertainty. The king and princess understand the stakes. Should history shift, our line may vanish, yet they willingly shoulder that burden for the survival of all humankind." She turned to Lucian at last. "We harbor no ill will toward the participating magi. They believe in this cause as fervently as we do. One favor remains. For the sake of the realm, we ask you to keep every detail of this operation strictly confidential." Lucian met her gaze, resolve hardening in his chest. "My lips are sealed," he vowed. "I will carry this secret to my grave, if need be." As the council dispersed and torches guttered low, Lucian remained by the map of the Eclipse Gate, pondering the impossible journey ahead. 7 years into the past, face to face with Zareth, before his fall. One chance to rewrite fate. The gravity of it pressed on him like a physical weight, yet beneath that burden bloomed a single, unwavering hope, that by altering history's darkest moment, he could spare the future from ruin. Arcadios slammed a hand on the table. "We cannot let word of this get out. If the court learns we've discovered time travel, the entire realm will descend into chaos." Lucian sat back, calm but resolute. He knew Arcadios had sensed the intrusion into his memories, an unspoken acknowledgement that he'd read the Archmage's mind by magic. Arcadios' gaze hardened. "If we start rewriting history," the Archmage continued, "we have no idea what unintended changes we might unleash. Entire lineages could vanish, new dynasties arise in their place. You'd doom thousands of innocents to non-existence. No one could bear that price." Lucian shook his head. "I admire your sense of responsibility, but your plan is flawed on 2 counts. First, during my journey to the northern continent, I learned the Black Dragon's true name, Akunologia. He was not summoned or created by Zareth. Even if we assassinate Zareth centuries ago, Akunologia would still roam our skies today. Second, every chronomantic theory I've studied confirms it. You can travel to the past, but you cannot rewrite the present. Time isn't a page you can erase and repaste. It's an unbreakable current." Lucian shook his head. "Third," he said, "suppose we somehow travel back and kill Zareth before the Black Dragon ever comes into being. On paper, that sounds perfect. No Zareth, no Black Dragon. But think it through. If the Black Dragon never rises, the dragon race never falls. A thriving dragon civilization would have continued unchecked, and humanity might already be extinct. The threat and the outcome remains just as dire, only the villain's name changes." He paused, letting the idea settle. "Time, you see, is like a river that only flows forward. You can slow it, even spring ahead, but you can't reverse its current to rewrite history. Of course, in fiction, each universe has its own rules. In the Marvel universe, traveling to the past actually splits reality into a new timeline, so your original history stays intact. In Harry Potter, every trip back with a time turner was always part of what happened. You can't alter events, you only fulfill them. And in Back to the Future, changing the past really does reshape the future you return to. He looked up, eyes bright with conviction. So before anyone hunts down Zareth in the past, they'd better be certain which model they're dealing with, because in some worlds, you're not saving tomorrow, you're condemning it. Lucian's research into the world's chronomancy told him one thing. The laws of time here worked much like they do in the Marvel Multiverse. If the Eclipse Gate before him truly could send someone back, it wouldn't rewrite his own past. Instead, it would deposit him into the past of an alternate timeline, leaving his own history untouched. Impossible, Arcadios scoffed, crossing his arms. Lucian didn't flinch. He flexed his gauntleted fingers until razor-sharp cat claws slid free, catching the torchlight. I know it sounds unbelievable, he said quietly, but it's the truth. With a deft movement, Lucian produced a small, ornately carved box from his stepping space. Carefully, he placed the Eclipse Gate inside and sealed the lid. In an instant, the device vanished into the pocket dimension. There, he announced. That should keep you from doing anything reckless. Arcadios stared at the spot where the gate had stood, disbelief and frustration warring on his face. Lucian tucked the box away. Of course, he wanted to study the gate, for a magical apparatus capable of warping time and space was the find of a lifetime. Yet even more compelling was the lure of the past itself. This age boasted precious few dragons, but if he could slip into a bygone era, even one in another timeline, he'd find them in abundance. And with each dragon slain, he'd harvest caches of dragon crystals unlike anything available in the present. His fingers itched at the thought. One day soon, Lucian vowed, he'd master the Eclipse Gate and step into history itself. Lucian paused, weighing his next moves. If he slew enough adversaries, perhaps he really could unlock the devouring magic the Black Dragon once wielded. And as for powering the Eclipse Gate, he wouldn't need to siphon energy from some great wizard. His new draconic form, combined with its uncanny regenerative power, would replenish the gate's reserves in days, maybe a fortnight at most. All he had to do was wait for the next rare lunar eclipse in 7 years. Then he'd open the gate and plunge the realm back into the Dragon Clan's golden age. Arcadios' face twisted with fury. How dare you, he snarled. You're a common thief. The Eclipse Gate is a treasure of this kingdom, handed down for centuries. Return it at once, or I'll report you to the king and devise a plan to take it back. With a sudden movement, he drew his sword, its steel glinting in the torchlight. Lucian met his gaze coolly, unruffled. Go ahead, he said softly. Tell your king I've taken the gate. I'll give it back after the eclipse in 7 years. By then, your little schemes will be meaningless. And don't even think of trying to seize it by force. Lucian met Arcadios' gaze without a flicker of hesitation. On one side, you can't best me in a fair fight. On the other, I know teleportation magic, instant access to the Magic Council itself. If you try to seize this by force, I'll go public with your entire scheme and hand it straight to them. You've breached at least 30 of their safety regulations. I'm certain they'd be delighted to pay your king a friendly visit. Before Arcadios could utter a word of protest, Lucian vanished from the courtyard, reappearing moments later in the quiet of the dormitory. In the kingdom of Fiore, the crown ruled over everyday affairs, but real power lay with the Magic Council, the body that governed all wizards across the East Continent, not just those within the kingdom's borders. Chapter 374, Don't Send the Rubbish, third update. After Lucian departed, Captain Arcadios wasted no time. He strode straight into the throne room and reported the turmoil to King Thomas E. Fiore, Princess Emerald E. Fiore, and Minister of Defense Dutton. It's absolute chaos down there, Arcadios declared. We need to dispatch the Hungry Wolf Knights immediately. Minister Dutton slammed his fist on the table, eyes flashing. I never approved of this Eclipse Gate scheme, but I won't stand by while some rogue sorcerer insults our royal lineage and attempts to abscond with a treasure handed down for generations. King Thomas, his orange mantle hooded around him, frowned deeply. He'd long harbored doubts about using the gate to travel back in time and assassinate Zareth. Yet both Arcadios and the princess had insisted on its importance. and now Lucian's words sounded disturbingly plausible. He turned to his daughter. "Emerald, whether this mage's claims are true or not, we cannot leave the Eclipse Gate in his possession. We must recover it at once." Though barely 12, Princess Emerald stood with the poise of a seasoned ruler. As sole heir to the throne, she met her father's gaze without hesitation. "You're right, father. The Eclipse Gate is our heritage, and we cannot risk anyone meddling with the natural flow of history. Send the hungry wolves. Let's bring our treasure home immediately." The grand hall of the palace war chamber was tense with anticipation. Ministers and generals clustered around a broad, rune-encrusted table, its surface lit by flickering torchlight. At the head sat King Aldemar, his gaze unwavering. "I recommend we dispatch the hungry wolf knights," the Minister of Defense said, rising to his feet. He cleared his throat and bowed once to the king. King Aldemar tapped his fingertips together, weighing the proposal. Finally, he inclined his head. "Proceed," he ordered, "but do not kill him. Lucian means no harm. Bring him back alive and lock him in the royal dungeons." The minister's posture straightened. "You have my word, your majesty. The hungry wolf knights act with precision and restraint." A low murmur rippled through the council. The Knights of the Hungry Wolf were no ordinary force. They served the crown alone, an elite cadre of 5 S-rank mages whose specialty was killing magic. Each was a master in his own right, and together they formed an unbreakable unit. In the kingdom's history, no mission they undertook had ever failed. Even a Saint 10-level sorcerer like Lucian would stand little chance against their combined power. At the minister's command, a complex circle of glowing runes sprang to life in the center of the room. The runes pulsed and shifted, then flared at once, and 5 figures materialized within the magic ring. Clad in distinctive battle-worn armor and bearing staffs etched with silver sigils, they looked every bit the masters among magicians. "Hungry Wolf Knights," the minister intoned. "Your mission is to retake the Eclipse Gate and apprehend Lucian. Bring him back alive." The knights exchanged silent nods. Without another word, they turned, their cloaks sweeping behind them, and strode toward the heavy doors that led to the palace stables, where their war horses and portal crystals awaited. In moments, they would be on their way to the Eclipse Gate, and the fate of both kingdom and renegade sorcerer would hang in the balance. "Remember, make as little noise as possible. We can't let tomorrow's tournament be compromised." "Your Highness, don't worry," replied the leader of the Hungry Wolf Knights, twin great scythes still embedded in his back. "We'll have Lucian back within the half-hour we promised. His wounds are serious, though. We'll need the court physicians standing by." With that, he and 4 of his knights vanished into the corridors. 15 minutes later, a panting soldier burst into the throne room. "Your Majesty, the Hungry Wolf Knights have returned." "As expected," said the Minister of Defense, leaning forward in his seat. "They said 30 minutes, but they finished in 15. The soldier gave a quick bow. "Actually, sir, Lucian was carried back." The minister's praise died on his lips. "Carried back?" "Yes, Your Excellency." The soldier caught his breath. "Our perimeter scouts saw all 5 knights enter the Fairy Tale Guild's dormitory. A moment later, they emerged carrying Lucian. No sounds, no alarms. They've brought him straight here." The king rose at once. "Then let us tend to him without delay." In barely 2 minutes, Lucian had reduced the 5 veteran knights to unconscious heaps and sent them tumbling through the shattered window. A scrap of parchment drifted down behind them. The Minister of Defense retrieved it and read aloud, "Next time, don't send this kind of trash to embarrass us." A stunned silence fell over the courtyard. These weren't ordinary soldiers, but the fabled Hungry Wolf Knights, the strongest Holy 10 in the royal family, and they'd been laid low in minutes, then dismissed as trash. Slowly, King Alistair, Princess Isolde, the Minister of Defense, and Lord Arcadios exchanged grim looks. The evidence was undeniable. Lucian was no mere Holy 10. His power rivaled that of Ishgar's 4 heavenly kings. A wave of powerlessness washed over the assembled nobles. Even the Magic Council wielded no authority over someone of Lucian's caliber, and the crown dared not appeal to them. At last the king drew a slow breath and nodded. "Let him be for now," he said, relief mingling with resignation. "After all, his 7-year contract still binds him to our realm." Tomorrow's final is going to be far more exciting than I expected, Lucian thought, stretching his shoulders. For now, though, things would remain quiet. He sat in the common room of the inn, now serving as the team's makeshift dormitory, eyes closed as he reviewed the new spells he'd just gleaned. When the Hungry Wolf Knights had stormed in earlier, his spiritual perception had warned him of their approach. He'd erected a barrier at once, making sure the clash stayed contained and didn't spill over to his teammates. A handful of those mercenaries proved legitimately skilled, true top-tier magicians, each with a unique repertoire, but none could match Lucian's prowess. Over and over, he'd outmaneuvered and subdued them, first in a quick skirmish, then again in a longer duel, and yet again under increasingly hostile conditions. Each victory let him siphon snippets of their memories, study their techniques, and replicate their spells. When he'd finished, he simply tossed his unconscious opponents out the window. Among the arcane talents he'd harvested were marked pursuit, acid corrosion, terrain manipulation, paper snow, and plant life magic, all promising if one devoted the effort to master them. Lucian opened his eyes and murmured to himself, "Marked pursuit. You inscribe a sigil on your target, then launch a weapon that unerringly homes in on it. Handy, but not revolutionary." He leaned forward, ready to delve into the next spell. Tomorrow's battle might be even tougher, but Lucian couldn't wait to see what it would bring. Lucian hovered over the scattered scrolls and half-finished runes on his work table, his mind racing through the possibilities each magic held. First on his list was the tracking mark. By inscribing even the smallest trinket with this enchantment, he could tether it magically to a target's life force. Once marked, that person became susceptible to any directed spell, whether a slicing windblade or a true curse like the infamous Killing Hex. Unless the enemy managed a powerful ward, there was simply no dodging it. He reached next for the formulas on acid corrosion. This was a brutal, specialized offensive, a mist of acidic vapors that ate through the finest armors and reinforced barriers. Against opponents who prided themselves on elemental shields, a well-aimed bolt of acid corrosion would shatter every defense. But terrain magic remained Lucian's true fascination. With this spell, he could reshape the very land, erupting magma fields where lava roared and twisted wells that pinned foes to the ground like helpless flies. He'd turned entire battlefields into howling gales, frozen tundras, even eerie realms of perpetual black and white dusk. And if his reserves held strong enough, he mused, there was no reason why the zone couldn't stretch for miles, maybe even grow to cover a whole planet. Finally, he turned to the peculiar versatility of paper magic. Thin sheets of enchanted paper could be stamped with elemental runes, firebolts, shards of ice, even tendrils of psychic influence. The prized blue Amor card was among the most devious. A single touch could twist an adversary's emotions against them, making the mind itself a battlefield. Lucian imagined combining it with his soul-stealing curse to crush any will that dared stand against him. Leaning back, Lucian surveyed his notes. With these spells at his command, he felt ready for anything the world might throw at him. Lucian sank deeper into his chair, turning the problem over in his mind. Plant magic, the art of commanding and strengthening vegetation, was already powerful on its own. But if he could weave it together with elven magic, or even fuse it with his wood dragon heritage, the possibilities would be extraordinary. There was real potential here, and he intended to explore every avenue. He glanced at the moonlit window. He'd wait until first light, then slip over to the Magic Development Bureau's library and scan the crucial volume that had sparked these ideas. Tomorrow, however, held other business. It was the final day of the Great Magician's Martial Tournament. As soon as the last bout ended, Lucian planned to cast his copy spell in secret, duplicating every relevant grimoire on the Bureau's shelves. He'd stash the replicas in his satchel and return to his quarters, where he could pore over them at his own pace. After all, the Hungry Wolf Knight's signature spells and all the alchemical recipes and enchantments showcased at the conference had come straight from that very library. If he could get his hands on them, his mastery of both plant magic and wood dragon power would skyrocket. With that decided, Lucian allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Tonight he would rest, and tomorrow he would begin turning potential into power. Chapter 375, Being Targeted. It was the final day of the Grand Demon Wushu tournament. When Lucian led Lecky and the other 4 guild members into the arena, he noticed that the crowd wasn't just cheering. They were all waving small flags, each embossed with the emblem of their favorite guild. A glance around told him that nearly 80% of those banners flew the fairy tale crest. "Guildmaster, look, everyone's cheering for us," Lecky said, her eyes shining with tears. As the stadium thundered with chants of fairy tale, and a sea of corresponding flags waved in unison, Lecky and the others couldn't hold back their emotions. When they'd first arrived at the tournament, their guild had been virtually unknown. Few spectators had even recognized their name, let alone rooted for them. They felt indebted to Lucian. Without his leadership, Fairy Tale's core would have withered away, leaving this handful of mages alone and forgotten. Lucian, however, showed no outward reaction. He walked onto the field with the same calm composure he always wore. "Popularity comes from strength," he said quietly. "These cheers are fleeting and external. True power lies in refining ourselves from the inside out." With that, he stepped forward, unmoved by the applause, his focus already fixed on the battles ahead. Lucian stared down at the roaring crowd and reminded himself of a truth he'd learned early. They only cheered for strength. If you weren't strong enough, you weren't even worth a glance. So he refused to let the applause distract him. Power, that was the only thing that mattered. With enough strength, money, influence, even fame and beauty could be his. But none of it meant a thing without power as the foundation. A final gong sounded through the arena. The host's voice boomed overhead. "Welcome, everyone, to the last match of the Grand Magic Tournament, and now, please welcome our rules commentator, Mr. Pumpkin." At that moment, the smiling hologram of the Pumpkin Man flickered into view high above the field. His oversized jack-o'-lantern head bobbed cheerfully as he began. "Contestants, the third round is a free-for-all battle royale. Here's how it works. 30 teams will be randomly deployed into the mock town erected at the center of this arena. Once the signal sounds, you may engage any opponent. For every enemy wizard you defeat, your team earns 1 point. Fallen wizards are removed from the field. This match will run for exactly 4 hours. Survive, score points, and you could win it all." As Pumpkin Man's grin faded, Lucian's jaw tightened. 4 hours of relentless combat. No distractions. Only strength would carry him, and that was exactly what he was here to prove. 4 hours remain until the final scores are tallied. The guild that accumulates the most points across these last 3 battles will be crowned the kingdom's strongest wizard guild, awarded a gleaming trophy, and a prize purse of up to 30 million gold coins. Once the masked announcer finished laying out the rules, the 30 guild teams dispersed into smaller huddles, deep in strategy sessions. This climactic battle isn't just about raw power, it's about coordination, timing, and cunning. In a sprawling simulated townscape, 150 wizards will duel, points awarded for each defeat inflicted. The greater a team's overall prowess, the higher their score. But brute force alone won't guarantee victory. Strategic finesse will be just as crucial. "Which approach are we taking?" Lucky asked Lucian, lowering his voice. "Do we go on the offensive from the start, or do we hold back and pick our moments?" Lucian studied the map pinned to the table. In this tournament, 2 core tactics prevail. The active strategy sends teams hunting for foes right away, dispatching opponents swiftly to rack up points. The passive strategy, by contrast, calls for patience, lying in wait until frontline skirmishes have thinned the ranks, then striking weakened opponents to steal their points. Which path would lead them to the coveted title and prize fund? The next 4 hours would decide their fate. Lucian paused to weigh their options. "We have 2 basic approaches," he began, addressing his 4 teammates. "The first is to seize the initiative, to strike early, rack up points, and keep the other wizards on the back foot. The risk, of course, is that our own reserves, both magical and physical, will be drained, leaving us vulnerable to counterattacks. The second approach is more conservative. Shadow someone else's assault, wait for their exhaustion, then swoop in and claim points from their leftovers. It's safer, but if they hide successfully, or we fail to find them before time runs out, all that waiting will be for nothing." He looked each of them in the eye. "Here's what I propose. You 4 take up defensive positions and watch for any flankers. I'll go on the offensive. I'll make enough noise that you can track me, then close in once you've located my position. If we can defeat a majority of the participating wizards, we'll win this round." No one objected. While they hashed out final details, the arena's center suddenly shimmered with arcane energy. A vast magic circle blazed into being, its runes pulsing like a heartbeat. Then, as if summoned by the very air, a fully realized town sprouted from the ground. Temporary walls, winding streets, market stalls, even a central fountain. Most teams felt a twinge of despair at the sight. Only the most powerful guilds could hope to command such a battlefield. But Lucian's squads steeled themselves. No matter how daunting the field, every point still had to be earned. With a shared nod, they dispersed, 4 guardians slipping into the shadows, and Lucian, heart-pounding, stepping boldly toward the newly formed town. Only the top guild wins its place by sheer power. After that, every ranking is decided by points. The more you score, the higher you climb. Every guild wants to nudge itself a few spots up the list. Once the Grand Magic Martial Arts competition ends, the entire kingdom will consult this ranking to judge a guild's worth, and so will guild sponsors and patrons. For the sake of honor and future commissions, no one intends to slack off in their final match. Rumor had it that many smaller guilds planned to slip past the heavy hitters, pick off only weaker teams for quick points, then disappear until the competition closed. It seemed a safe strategy. Win a handful of bouts, then hide in the maze of streets and tents until the very end. Dong! The ceremonial gong echoed across the mountainside. 30 teams, 150 wizards in all, were led in single file, each pair of eyes covered by a black silk blindfold. They passed through a throbbing crowd into the makeshift settlement at the heart of the arena and were guided straight to their assigned quarters. This temporary town had been carved out of the mountain's foothills, tents and wooden shacks dotting every ridge and plateau. Ancient stone paths wound between the buildings, and lanterns swung in the crisp night air. For each competitor, it felt as vast as a small city, and every shadow might conceal a rival, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Lucian removed his blindfold only after the final wizard had been settled. The moonlight revealed the bustle of mages preparing wards, sharpening staves, and murmuring last-minute incantations. Competition banners snapped in the wind, proclaiming the Grand Magic Martial Arts competition to all who entered. No one would underestimate these grounds, nor the stakes. Here, every duel would be watched by noble patrons, by guildmasters sending dispatches to the capital, and by dozens of rival wizards eager to prove themselves. Lucian took a steadying breath, adjusted his robes, and stepped into the lantern-lit street. It was time to play for keeps. Lucian hovered at the edge of the balcony, eyes sweeping over the sprawling town below. 150 competitors had been dispersed across this makeshift city, yet the jumble of rooftops and narrow alleyways made any search a Herculean task. After all, the conference venue was nothing short of colossal. Task Grand Auditorium alone could seat nearly every citizen of Baihua City, and guests from distant towns and even foreign lands. Stretched end to end, the temporary settlement rivaled any ordinary city in size. "The game begins," boomed the host's voice through hidden speakers. In unison, the wizards ripped off their enchanted goggles. Lucian tossed his aside and let out a soft chuckle. The sensation was oddly familiar, like that old variety show he'd binged in his previous life. He glanced around the master bedroom where he'd woken up, a simple second-floor suite in a modest house. Stretching, he padded out onto the balcony and flexed his wings. With a single powerful beat, he lifted into the crisp air. Once aloft, he unleashed his magical perception, sending invisible tendrils of awareness weaving between the rooftops and windows. Within moments, his senses locked onto a lone figure peering out from an upstairs window just a short distance away. Lucian smiled to himself. His hunt had begun. Lucian's eyes narrowed as he spotted his opponent. The wizard's face went pale, and with a muttered incantation, he wrapped himself in a gust of wind and sprinted for safety. "Fall!" Lucian called, and in a heartbeat he closed the distance. With a single gesture, he unleashed a sleep spell that froze the fleeing mage in his tracks. A crystal-clear notification echoed across the arena. Magic notice. A Sheba of the Iron Fang Guild has been defeated and eliminated by Lucian of Fairy Tale. Lucian spared a glance at the empty spot where Ashiba had stood. He inhaled sharply, ready to press his advantage, and then the sound of 4 simultaneous chimes cut through the crowd's roar. He frowned, scanning the arena's magical display. 4 notifications at once. Am I being targeted? Lucian's hand drifted to the spell etched on his grimoire as he prepared for whatever and whoever would come next. Chapter 376, The Cat Too Big for One City, second update. An announcer's voice echoed across the stadium. Fairy Tail's Lucky has been defeated by Mermaid Heel's Kagura. Fairy Tail's Marcus has been taken down by Blue Pegasus. Fairy Tail's Arzak has fallen to Four-Headed Hound's Pakas. Fairy Tail's Bisca has been eliminated by Snake Princess Scale Jura. The audience gasped as the 4 eliminations registered. At the very start of the tournament, 4 of Fairy Tail's finest had been dispatched, and all by the leaders of the 4 champion guilds. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Were the top guilds colluding to knock Fairy Tail out early? Lucian's brow furrowed as he heard the names. For a moment, he entertained the same suspicion, but he shook his head. Blue Pegasus's former master had once come from Fairy Tail, and the 2 guilds shared a warm friendship. Blue Pegasus's healers had often treated Fairy Tail mages in times of need. There was no way they'd stoop to a conspiracy. The Four-Headed Hound's Pakas likewise had roots in Fairy Tail, and Scale Jura of the Snake Princess had always maintained cordial ties with their eastern counterparts. Nothing about these opponents suggested foul play. They were simply formidable champions at the top of their game. Lucian watched Jura and Leo carefully. Both were men of honor. Surely they wouldn't stoop to deceit. That kind of trickery belonged to ruthless outfits like the sword-biting tigers, and their current foes weren't known for such tactics. He narrowed his eyes. Was this just a coincidence, or was there something he'd overlooked? He shook his head. Speculation without evidence was pointless, and frankly, he didn't mind. He'd brought along 4 Lecky mercenaries to round out his party. If they fell, it only thinned his liabilities and let him unleash his true power. Before they arrived, he'd held back on large-scale spells for fear of injuring them. Very well, he muttered, a spark of amusement in his voice. You sought me out? All right, let's see what you've got. He was moments away from finishing the skirmish with a single overwhelming blow when a sudden ripple of energy brushed his consciousness. 5 mages, from the remaining 5 tournament master guilds, had slipped into his aura and were bearing down on him. Intrigue blossomed in Lucian's chest. Clearly, this was no random clash, but a coordinated strike. And now he was eager to learn why. Lucian paused, casting aside any thought of hunting down random wizards to pad his score. Instead, he descended the grand staircase and took up position in the courtyard, waiting for the representatives of the other 5 champion guilds to arrive. 2 minutes later, a group of 25 well-armed wizards emerged in formation. At their head stood Minerva, her silken fan flicking in annoyance as she swayed her hips and smiled at Lucian. "Lucian," she purred, "you're undoubtedly strong, but tell me, how do you intend to handle what comes next?" Lucian ignored Minerva's teasing, keeping his eyes locked on the 4 guild leaders standing behind her. His calm voice cut through the tension. "I understand why the Sword-Waist Tiger Guild set this little trap," he said evenly. "But you 4, why did you join them? Think carefully before you answer. Your choice will determine how badly you'll be hurt." Jura, chieftain of the Ironheart Coven, shifted uncomfortably. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then hesitated. Finally, he admitted, "This morning, one of our fellow mages vanished without a trace. A note arrived. She said that unless we band together to take you down, she'll never be seen again." He trailed off, but Lucian needed no more explanation. Kidnapping a member of each guild, then threatening their lives to force a truce. That was an old trick, but it worked every time. He allowed himself a slow, cold smile. "So you see," he said, voice low, "there are only 2 ways this ends. You all walk away unharmed, or you come at me and find out how lethal I can be." The courtyard fell silent as the guild leaders exchanged worried glances. Lucian straightened, ready for whatever choice they made. Lucian's eyes narrowed as he watched Minerva. "Aren't you worried this could get you disqualified?" After the match, Jura and the other guildmasters would undoubtedly report Minerva's tactics to the crown. Even if Sword's Bite claimed first place, any official complaint could strip them of their victory, and ruin their reputation in the process. Minerva only smiled. They've got no proof. Rumors aren't enough to touch us. Lucian let the silence stretch for a moment, then leaned in. Who's covering for you? Who's your patron? Minerva's confidence flickered, but she kept her composure. In that instant, everything clicked for Lucian. At the start of the tournament, Lucia and her 3 companions had been eliminated. Yet Sword's Bite had somehow coerced those 4 guilds in a matter of hours, locking down their positions, then immediately rescued them, reunited with them, and located him almost at once. Add to that last night's strange events, and there was only one logical conclusion. Someone high up in the royal family was orchestrating this. The royal court must have tipped off the sword-biting tiger ahead of time, briefing him on today's match, and quietly arranged for Lecky and the other 4 to be pitted directly against the 5 guild teams. That way, even if Jura and the others filed a complaint, it wouldn't matter. Without proof, the crown would simply rule in their favor. The royal family's plan is clear: to harness the combined might of the 5 great magician guilds, crush the tiger, and reclaim the Eclipse Gate. Minerva shook her head. There's no point in protesting. The court will side with them every time. Lucian's lips curved into a faint smile. You're banking on the wrong outcome. He rose to his feet. Sure, the 5 great guilds boast the top 25 magicians in the land, at worst S rank, with dozens more at S+, and even Holy 10 level. If they band together, even the 4 kings of Ishgard would bow their heads. But there's one thing they can't handle: a war of attrition. Who outlasts whom in the end? He paused, meeting each of their eyes. I say we face them head-on, all of us, together. If you hand him over to me, I'll release your guild members, then we can settle this fairly for the title of the strongest wizard guild. Minerva's eyes flickered. There are people up there? She demanded, fanning herself with sudden urgency. Jura and the others exchanged guilty glances, but faced with the safety of their friends, began reciting their spells. Arcane symbols glowed beneath their feet. All right, Minerva purred, her tone turning cold, but why stop at just one of you? A single sweep will be much more efficient. With a sharp flick of her fan, the air crackled with frost. At that moment, Lucian stretched his wings and leapt into the sky. The runes on the ground below him ignited, forming a colossal magic circle. Giant magic, transformation, he cried. Light exploded outward, and Lucian's form began to swell. From a mere cat's stature, he shot up to tens of meters, then hundreds, until he towered 3,000 meters above the city, a living colossus. His mastery of giant magic had surpassed even Makarov's legendary feats. Thanks to his ever-growing magical power, Lucian's cat form could now eclipse the size of his own dragon transformation. From this vantage point, the battlefield lay before him, as did his adversaries. Today, no one would doubt who the strongest truly was. Lucian chose his cat form precisely because its magic roots were weaker, making it far more responsive to giant spells. His dragon form, by contrast, was built like living armor. It resisted his growth magic, capping out at barely 1,000 meters. Even so, the sheer strength of that 1,000-meter dragon would eclipse the physical might of a 3,000-meter cat. But in this world, anyone who morphed into a dragon would spark a sensation the likes of which no mage could control. So Lucian settled for a cat. Less dramatic, but more practical. With a deep breath, he channeled every ounce of his giant magic. Around him, the auditorium trembled. Below, Minerva and the other wizards gaped in disbelief. The audience fell silent as Lucian's cat form swelled skyward, its paws blotting out buildings, its back eclipsing the sun. In moments, the enormous feline towered over the city, 3 kilometers from nose to tail, a living shadow across the landscape. A voice echoed from the stunned crowd. It can't fit in the city. Minerva's jaw dropped. I've studied giant transformations for decades. I've never seen anything like this. Lucian flexed his colossal claws and let out a reverberating purr that shook windows for miles. Even stripped of most of its raw strength compared to the dragon, this gargantuan cat was enough to make the entire world take notice. And that was exactly what he wanted. Chapter 377. The Roaring Cat. Take out those weaklings first. Lucian flexed his fingers until they formed a colossal feline-esque claw that blotched out the midday sun. With a primal roar, he brought it down in a sweeping arc across the mock town at the center of the arena. In an instant, the simulated buildings shattered, and dozens of less experienced wizards were hurled into the stands like rag dolls. Panic erupted on the opposing side. "Crocodile skin!" someone shouted, raising a scaly barrier of shimmering green. "Wild boar tusks!" another cried, summoning jagged ivory projections to intercept the blow. "Mammoth trunk!" a third invoked, forming a colossal trunk of solid stone to absorb the impact. But it was too late. Alarms blared throughout the hall. Lucian's cat slash had eliminated over 1/3 of the competitors in a single strike. "We can't let him continue." Minerva, the Swordbite Tiger Guild's Minister of Defense, leapt to her feet. Her heart pounded at the sight of Lucian's effortless massacre. If he dispatched more than half the field, he'd claim unbeatable points, and their guild would be relegated to second place. "Focus all attacks on him. Knock him out if you can," Minerva ordered. Her goal was clear. Stop Lucian at any cost, deprive him of victory, and secure first place for the Swordbite Tigers, ensuring their reputation as the realm's strongest wizarding guild remained unchallenged. To the guild wizards, the royal family's authority is little more than a formality. They don't regard the crown as inherently noble, and the most formidable sorcerers, the so-called Four Heavenly Kings, see no need to curry favor with royalty or even the Magic Council. In a world where a single mage can rout an entire army, no human-run regime can achieve absolute supremacy. Nor is the Grand Magical Martial Arts Tournament popular simply because it bears the royal seal. Every guild vies for a chance to showcase its might, and they use this event to prove they're the strongest. The royal family happens to be the only institution capable of organizing such a massive gathering, so everyone goes along with it, but not out of deference. That's why Minerva has no fear of the defense minister or the throne. Their interactions are strictly business, nothing more. If Minerva failed to claim first place in the tournament, her bargain would collapse, so she reminded them in no uncertain terms, "Don't forget, your people are still in my hands." Barely hiding her irritation, Minerva wove a swift incantation. She'd caught Jura and the other guild leaders hesitating, and that was a luxury they couldn't afford. With a sharp glance, she warned them into action. Jura exchanged a quick, apologetic look with his comrades. For the sake of their captured allies, they steeled themselves, turned to face Lucian, and unleashed their mightiest spells all at once. Devil 18 Godfist Technique, Space Blast. Earth Magic, Overlord's Rock Crush. Aura of Power, Maxmen, Fearless Sky Strike, Flight Form, Drunken Fist Style Moonlit Serenade. 5 champion guild masters hurled their deadliest energies at Lucian. At their backs, dozens more mages, those fortunate enough to have survived Lucian's opening salvo, joined the onslaught with volleys of arcane fire and crackling lightning. Minerva's eyes gleamed as the storm of magic converged on her target. With a triumphant smirk, she called out above the roar. "You see, the trouble with power magic is that when you enlarge your force, you also enlarge your hitbox. Let's see how well you dodge this." As countless spells hurtled toward him, Lucian braced himself for the most brutal test of his skill yet. Giant magic truly is formidable, especially in the hands of a wizard like Lucian, who'd trained relentlessly to perfect it. His destructive power in giant form was nothing short of legendary. Yet even he couldn't deny its fatal flaw. However much it fortifies your defenses, giant magic simply can't cope when dozens of different spells come raining down at once. In a one-on-one duel, a single blow can be shrugged off. But in a one-on-many, no amount of magical armor will hold against that kind of onslaught. It was a mistake for Lucian to stay enlarged now. Instinctively, he shifted forms. With a sweeping gesture of his staff, he whispered the incantation he'd mastered back in the Apprentice realm, Hungarian Mirror World. Instantly, 2 colossal, polished mirrors materialized on either side of him, floating in midair. He'd spent years refining this mirror magic, enough to know that in his current cat form, his magic resistance was weak. He needed not brute force, but cunning. With the mirrors aligned, Lucian locked eyes on his attackers and chanted again. A faint ripple passed across the mirror's surfaces. Now, any spell thrown his way wouldn't slam into his vulnerable cat form. It would bounce back, amplified, straight at its caster. As the enemy mages unleashed their barrage, Lucian's smirk grew. he'd turned their greatest strength against them. As soon as Lucian's spell struck the first mirror, the torrent of arcane energy vanished, and a heartbeat later, it re-emerged through the second. With a single imperceptible motion of his hand, he rotated that mirror toward the Golden Palace just beyond the arena walls. He'd grown tired of the royal family's endless provocations. If they insisted on meddling in his affairs, he would be only too happy to return the favor. In the eyes of the onlookers, it would look like an unfortunate accident, the very magic the palace sent against him simply ricocheting back, as though channeled by some low-level conjurer's clumsy error. No grounds for royal complaint. But the courtiers and the king's advisors, all of them understood. This was Lucian's warning. Press him again, and the consequences would grow far more serious. Dense arcs of magic unfurled in a blinding cascade toward the gilded spires. Alarm bells thundered through the courtyard as palace guards scrambled to raise the warding barrier. Yet this was no ordinary skirmish. The spell was charged with the unleashed power of the kingdom's most formidable magicians, a show of force the royals would not soon forget. How could the palace's magical barrier alone stop him? With a sound like shattering glass, the shield collapsed, and the lingering force of his attack tore the palace apart. Walls buckled, supports splintered, and the entire structure crumbled into ruin. From a distance, the king, the princess, the defense minister, other high officials, and every wizard who had just unleashed spells onto the field stood frozen in disbelief. The evil cat roars. Lucian seized the moment. He opened his cat-like maw and unleashed a full-power, tri-colored flame straight at the heart of the arena below. The conflagration erupted instantly, incinerating dozens of mages in its path. Then, with a crackle of teleportation magic, Lucian vanished, leaving only the top S-class and Saint-class wizards, among them Kagura and Jura, still standing. By my count, that strike has secured Fairy Tail's lead. Unless one of those remaining titans defeats Lucian and steals those points, first place is already ours. Attack from multiple sides so he can't shift his magic. We still have a chance, Minerva ordered, glancing at the remaining elite wizards. Reluctantly, she adjusted her plan, determined to take down Lucian and reclaim their lost points. Before anyone could move, a cold, mocking voice cut through the air. Chance? What chance? Minerva looked up, but the immense spectral cat was gone. In an instant, Lucian reappeared right behind her. Drawing on both his otherworldly strength and arcane skill, he unleashed 3 spells in a single fluid motion: soul projection, mind reading, and domination. With those incantations, Lucian's magic dove into Minerva's thoughts, searching her memories for the 4 guild members she had imprisoned. Chapter 378, The Princess as a Hostage, second update. Lucian's eyes narrowed as Minerva's memories unfolded in his mind. He saw that her spatial magic did more than simply teleport people and objects. It also functioned as a living storage vault. Unlike the Tailor's pocket dimension, Minerva's space could imprison unconscious beings indefinitely. No wonder the 4 guild mages had all vanished. He's locked them inside her own space, Lucian murmured, realizing the truth too late for them to resist on their own. He raised his wand and wove the imperious curse. Under Lucian's absolute command, Minerva's arms lifted, and she broke the warding circle around her. With a soft pop, 4 silhouettes materialized on the tournament ground. Jula and her companions rushed forward, breathless with relief, to check on their guildmates. Each one was merely unconscious, shaken but unharmed. Jula clasped Lucian's arm. "Thank you," she whispered. Embarrassment and gratitude warred on their faces. They had set out to defeat him, yet here they stood, bested without warning. Without another word, the 4 conceded. Jula activated her teleportation sigil, and in a flash of light they were gone, vanished outside the arena. Even as they fled, it was clear in their minds they owed Lucian their thanks, and they knew they could never match his power. Lucian didn't even break stride as Jula and the others fell back. The giant magic they'd just witnessed, laced with true Dragon Slayer power, had left every onlooker shaken and wounded. No one dared challenge him one-on-one now, and yet Lucian showed no sign of having unleashed his ultimate technique. He stood cool and composed, as if nothing unusual had happened. "Go to hell!" Germain roared from beneath the shattered earth, bursting into the clearing. The leader of the sword-biting tigers and father to Minerva, he channeled the war god's magic into his blade. Divine edge, shadowless! Germain's sword blurred toward Lucian's back, but Lucian didn't even flinch. With a sharp flick of his tail, he summoned 2 invisible divine slashes. They tore through the air like silent reapers. In one cut, Germain's right hand and lower left leg fell to the ground with a wet thud. Germain staggered, cradling the shattered stump of his arm. His eyes burned with shock and pain. Lucian merely watched him, expression unreadable. Minutes earlier, Lucian had pierced Minerva's memories, glimpsing the true heart of the sword-biting tigers. Despite their savage reputation, Minerva had refused to deliver a killing blow to the 4 guild mages they'd beaten unconscious. An honorable streak ran through their ranks, one that Lucian now held as a potential bargaining chip. He stepped forward and beckoned Germain, voice low and calm. "Yield, and I'll spare you further harm. The fight is over." Germain's only reply was a tortured gasp. Lucian's knives of divine light faded, leaving him the undisputed victor, yet also the architect of an unexpected alliance. Minerva had endured her father Germain's brutality since she was a child. He beat her, warped her sense of right and wrong, and drilled into her that their bloodline was the strongest. All those years of abuse had shaped the woman she'd become, until now. High above the ruined courtyard, Lucian hovered, his robe billowing in the cold wind. Beneath him lay Germain's severed hands and feet, silent proof of his defeat. With a gentle motion, Lucian shattered the mental bonds that had held Minerva captive. "You've lost," he said quietly, gazing down at the broken man. "Your father, who claimed your blood was unbeatable, has been cut down by me. It turns out the strongest isn't you, it's Fairy Tale." Minerva's knees buckled, and she sank to the ground, speechless. Her father's harsh lessons came flooding back, only to crumble before her eyes. She covered her face with shaking hands and whispered, "No, this can't be. We were supposed to be the strongest. How could we lose?" Lucian drifted closer, offering a steady hand. "Your father lied to you. If you truly wish to stand among the strongest, then come with us. Join Fairy Tale, and you'll be part of the greatest guild in all the realms." Behind them, the distant shouts of approaching comrades echoed through the stone walls, Fairy Tale's main force on its way. Minerva looked up at Lucian, tears in her eyes but hope in her heart. Slowly she reached out and took his hand. In that moment, the weight of her past began to lift, and a new future opened before her at last. Lucian stared at the data floating before him. Even with Lucky's enchanted props bolstering their strength, there was still a yawning gap between mid-level mages like Lucky and the true masters of the craft. If Fairy Tale was ever going to be the premier guild, capable of tackling every mission that came its way, he needed someone on par with the very best. Minerva. That was the name he kept returning to. On the surface, Germain was the face of sword-biting tiger, ruthless, hot-headed, and completely lacking in patience. But it was Minerva who pulled all the strings, cool under pressure, brilliant in strategy, and versed in more magical disciplines than most could name. In the first 2 rounds of the tournament, Sword-Biting Tiger had tied with Fairy Tale thanks entirely to Minerva's battle formations. If they hadn't run into a wall of overwhelming force in the 3rd match, they'd have taken first place without question. Lucian replayed the echoes of her memories in his mind, every clever tactic, every subtle use of spatial magic. The more he learned, the more convinced he became. This was the talent Fairy Tale needed. He let out a long breath and smiled. "You are the strongest. Your guild is the strongest. Minerva, it's time. I want you in Fairy Tale." After Lucian's words echoed through the arena, Minerva's despair dissolved. Her eyes flared with renewed resolve as she forced herself to her feet. Across the field, Germain, his limbs hastily stitched back together, glared at her. "Minerva, how dare you betray me? I'll crush you myself," he roared, stalking toward her. Minerva met his fury with a cold smile. "Father, haven't you punished me enough? You always said the weak must be eliminated. By your own rulebook, you should have been cast aside long ago." With a single powerful kick, she sent Germain sprawling across the cracked stone. Unbeknownst to most, her strength had long since surpassed his, and the cruel lessons he drilled into her heart had severed every bond of filial loyalty. If he died here, she would feel nothing but relief. Let him remain team leader. she murmured, turning away. It's more useful to the guild if he takes the spotlight. A hush fell over the battered Colosseum as the host strode forward, his voice booming across the ruins. At the end of this contest, Fairy Tail has scored the highest points and claims the title of the strongest guild in the Great Demon War. Beyond the arena's wreckage, the shattered palace loomed, its broken towers silhouetted against a blood-red sky, the perfect backdrop for Fairy Tail's hard-earned triumph. Lucian's voice trembled as he announced the final tally. The moment he declared Fairy Tail the victor, the great hall erupted in cheers so thunderous it felt as if the ceiling might collapse, though no one cared. After all, palaces could be rebuilt, but a spectacle like today was priceless. By the end of the third duel, Fairy Tail had outscored the Swordbite Tigers by more than 140 points. Not only did they claim the coveted title of the realm's strongest guild, they also earned a 30 million gold bonus. A hush fell over the crowd when the king, absent all day, finally appeared at the head of the dais, flanked by the princess. With graceful formality, he approached Lucian and presented him with a gleaming gold chest. For a moment, all seemed cordial. Then the king's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You sent assassins to strike me last night," he said, eyes cold. "And today you allied with the Swordbite Tigers to undermine my court. Do you think I lack the will to retaliate? Believe it or not, I could make you the princess, and every one of your ministers vanish from this world as quietly as I could bring down these walls." A bead of sweat slid down Lucian's temple. He bowed, forcing a polite smile, though his heart pounded so fiercely he feared it might betray him. All this time, he'd believed the king's absence was mere royal protocol, never that he harbored such lethal resentment toward Fairy Tail. Now, clutching the trophy, Lucian's thoughts raced. How could he have been so blind? Chapter 10. The Minister's Secret Offer. Lucian stepped into the War Council chamber just as the last torch flickered out, plunging the room into near darkness. Before he could speak, the Minister of Defense lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I've arranged it privately," the minister said. "Tomorrow at dawn, you'll receive the Eclipse Gate. I trust that settles any lingering objections." Lucian's eyes narrowed. "You didn't do this on the king's direct orders," he countered. "If you had, the catastrophe wouldn't have been confined to the palace walls." A tense silence followed. Lucian knew why. Using his psychic gift on a monarch with no magical defenses, he'd probed the king's mind the previous night. The monarch had, in fact, agreed to relinquish the Eclipse Gate, but two people, his own daughter, Princess Ariel, and this very minister, had balked at the decision. The minister finally exhaled, folding his arms. "The Eclipse Gate will not be returned to your sovereign. Moreover, there's another condition. Princess Ariel must join our guild and remain under our protection throughout the 7-year eclipse. Only then will we release the gate to you." Lucian met the minister's gaze steadily. The fate of the kingdom and of the princess himself hung in that single, ironclad demand. Chapter 379, Expanding the Guild. Update 1. "Impossible! This is unacceptable." King Aldrich's voice shook with rage and disbelief. He had only one daughter, Princess Eveline, the sole heir to his throne, and the very thought of her joining the Wizard Guild, risking her life on dangerous missions, was unthinkable. Lucian held his gleaming trophy aloft, then climbed the steps to the throne. He wrapped an arm casually around the king's shoulders and, in a voice that seemed to echo directly inside the king's mind, said calmly, "Don't worry, I have no intention of harming your daughter or sending her on perilous quests. You're free to assign her tutors, guardians, or any advisors she needs to prepare for the throne. But she must remain within the guild. She cannot leave." King Aldrich recoiled, panic flickering in his eyes. "You can't do this. She's royalty." Lucian's lips curved into a cold smile. His words, spoken with telepathic clarity, cut through the tension. "If you refuse, I'll surmise you're still plotting against me. In that case, I'll eliminate you and your daughter first, and then every high official in this kingdom. After all, if one royal line falls, another will take its place." A heavy silence settled in the throne room as Lucian's threat hung in the air. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that only the king could hear. "Or, if you prefer, I could reveal all your hidden wrongdoings to the public and watch your own people deal with you." King Aldrich's face drained of color. Faced with Lucian's unbreakable will, he found he had no choice but to agree. But rest assured, they won't side with you. And even if they did, they couldn't defeat me together. The outcome would be the same. I had 2 reasons for persuading the princess to join our guild. First, her membership in a wizarding guild, especially the top-ranked one in this year's Grand Arcane tournament, will greatly enhance our prestige. That reputation boost will attract more talented mages and bring in lucrative commissions. Second, with the princess in our hands, I hold a powerful bargaining chip, a royal hostage. I can't simply topple the monarchy outright. That would spark public outrage. Once he returns home, the king will be consumed by his magical studies and neglect state affairs. Any interference from his family would only distract him from his craft. As long as I keep the heir as collateral, the royal line will never dare risk total extinction. The king's face flickered through anger, fear, and humiliation. At last, he forced a tight smile and nodded. "I swear it," he whispered. Lucian's heart pounded. There was no way he could accept, but before he could speak, the king raised his hand, seized the microphone from the master of ceremonies, and addressed every wizard and spectator in the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have one final announcement. Effective immediately, my daughter, Princess Emerald E. Fiora, will join the Fairy Tale Guild for a term of 7 years. At the end of those 7 years, she will return to the capital and assume the throne." It was a shrewd maneuver. The king distrusted Lucian enough to suspect he might try to wriggle out of their pact, so he deliberately set the succession date 7 years hence. That way, everyone knew the princess would someday leave Fairy Tale to claim her crown, and there was nothing Lucian could do about it. Yet instead of anger, a smile crept across Lucian's face. Having the heir apparent bound to Fairy Tale would only enhance the guild's reputation. Word would spread far and wide. The future monarch herself had sworn allegiance to their banner. A ripple of excitement swept through the crowd. Fairy Tale must be the strongest guild in existence, if even the princess joins them. No wonder they're so famous. To the common folk, no title was more exalted than the royal families, and now their beloved guild had won the greatest of all endorsements. The entire throne room fell silent when Lucian announced that the kingdom's heir, now styled a princess, would formally join the Fair Tale Guild. Courtiers exchanged startled glances, and the princess herself could hardly believe her ears. "Father, why on earth would you agree to this?" she burst out, her voice trembling. Before the king could reply, Lucian raised a hand, his expression calm but unyielding. "She will be under my protection. So long as your house never opposes Fairy Tale, your daughter will remain completely safe for the next 7 years." The princess stared at her father, bewildered by his sudden acquiescence. The king met Lucian's steady gaze and gave a slow nod. "Very well. It is an unusual request, but I see your sincerity." A satisfied smile curved Lucian's lips. "By the way, I understand the palace suffered serious structural damage recently?" The king's jaw tightened. He was sorely tempted to point out that the collapse had nothing to do with Lucian's guild. But faced with Fairy Tale's reputation and Lucian's own formidable power, he swallowed his pride and nodded again. "Yes, the West Wing partially collapsed during last month's storm." "Perfect," Lucian said. "My specialty is restoration magic. I can rebuild that section at minimal cost to the crown. You'll save a fortune on repairs." A ripple of astonished whispers swept through the assembled nobles. The princess looked from Lucian to her father, uncertainty still clouding her pale eyes. But the king, impressed despite himself, bowed in acceptance. By the time the investiture ceremony drew to a close and the king prepared to depart, Lucian had one more surprise. He touched a small, rune-etched gem at his belt and sent a private message directly into the king's mind. The words were brief, but they carried a warmth and promise that moved the monarch far more effectively than any royal decree. As the echoes of that final enchantment faded, the king walked away, a silent, thoughtful smile on his face. The princess stood in stunned silence, her future forever altered by the man called Lucian. Lucian stepped forward and bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, what conditions do you propose?" The king's shoulders tensed. Hosting the Grand Magic Show had already drained a great deal from the royal coffers, and rebuilding the palace threatened to push the treasury past its limit. He was loath to burden his people with higher taxes. After all, under his reign, the Fiore kingdom had never flourished more. Lucian, attuned to the monarch's thoughts, gave a subtle nod of approval. "It's very simple," Lucian continued. "I request access to every spellbook in the Magic Development Bureau and the Royal Library. Without the Crown's explicit blessing, certain classified texts would remain locked away, and Lucian might never uncover the most guarded secrets. But a royal decree would grant him unfettered entry to every chamber and archive." The king studied Lucian's earnest face for a long moment, then inclined his head. "Granted," he said at last. The ancient volumes, passed down through the centuries, were indeed priceless heirlooms of the crown. Yet Lucian had no intention of removing a single page. He sought only to read and learn. Besides, his might was already unmatched in Fiore. A few new insights would scarcely upset the balance of power. It felt like standing before a man with a gun, completely unarmed. Whether he gripped a pistol or a submachine gun, it made no difference. One bullet was all it would take. "Very good," Lucian declared. With a powerful beat of his wings, he lifted off from the podium and sped toward the shattered palace. Once he reached the ruins, he drew a deep breath and began weaving the repair spell. Restore it exactly as it was. Years of studying time magic had given Lucian profound insight into the true nature of restoration. He realized that, at its core, the repair spell simply reversed time, meaning that if you could master temporal manipulation deeply enough, you could not only fix broken walls and crumbling towers, but potentially heal wounds, or even revive the fallen. Merely by rolling back someone's personal clock to a moment when they were whole, you performed a repair of the highest order. "So this is the legendary repair wizard," he thought with a quiet thrill. The assembled wizards and spectators gasped as Lucian hovered above the wreckage, magic crackling around him. In the blink of an eye, wooden beams reknit themselves, stones snapped back into place, and the palace stood as good as new, every arc of the roof, every carved pillar, flawless. Whispers rippled through the crowd. They had heard tales of Fairy Tale's famous repair wizard, but none had imagined the master to be a cat, let alone one so powerful. By the time the last flourish of magic settled and the applause died down, the awards ceremony was drawing to a close, and daylight had already slipped into early afternoon. Lucian was gathering his things for the trip to the Magic Development Bureau in the capital when Minerva swept into his dormitory, 3 newcomers in tow. "I'd like to enroll them in the guild," she announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. The young mage looked up. "Who are they?" Minerva gave a brief introduction. "This is Rufus Noah, a master of dual blades. That's Olga Nanagil, whose brute strength is unmatched. And over there is Yukino Agulia, renowned for her precise water magic." She turned back to Lucian. "No objections, right? Once they've settled in, have them report to Macau in the hall." Lucian remembered them well. The same 3 who'd taken part in the recent Swordbite Tiger tournament. In that very contest, he'd defeated Olga in mere seconds. Yet despite that swift outcome, all 3 had proven their mettle, and certainly deserved a place in the guild. "Very well," Lucian said, offering them a welcoming nod. "Macau's office is on the 2nd floor. I'll let him know you're coming." With that, the new recruits exchanged determined glances, and Minerva, satisfied, took her leave. Lucian watched the trio file past, curious to see how they'd fare under Macau's watchful eye. Chapter 380, 2 dragons join the guild. Olga, of course, wields Thunder Godslayer magic. Now that he's joined Fairy Tale, he'll be free to study and refine it alongside our masters. Rufus specializes in ancient memory modeling, a rare, sophisticated art that can manifest spells and objects stored in the mind, then evolve them by weaving in his own insights to create entirely new magic. His strength ranks just below Minerva and Germaine, placing him on par with the highest S-class wizards. Yukino, a stellar wizard much like Lucy, possesses 2 golden keys. Her power level is roughly half that of an S-class mage. To open the Eclipse Gate, however, the guild needs a total of 12 golden keys. Guildmaster Makarov pointed out that Lucy alone has already claimed 10 keys by defeating the 6 demon generals. Add Yukino's 2, and they hit exactly 12. With everything in order, Makarov instructed Minerva to escort Olga, Rufus, and Yukino to headquarters so the paperwork can be finalized. Meanwhile, Lucian immersed himself in the Magic Development Bureau's immense archives. Their collection of spell tomes and research journals dwarfs even Fairy Tale's legendary library. Day after day, he pored over ancient formulas and experimental theories, determined to reproduce and eventually improve upon the most powerful magic known. Despite his best efforts, there are still countless volumes he hasn't yet explored. And so, with two formidable mages newly enrolled and Lucian deep in arcane study, Fairy Tale's strength and its reputation continues to grow. Lucian had every intention of sneaking a duplicate of the royal tome back to the guild library. After all, he'd sworn the king he wouldn't remove the original, but he'd never said anything about copying it. A simple duplication spell would let him pore over its contents at his own pace and bolster the guild's collection in the process. That evening, as he stepped into the guild dormitory, Macau came hurrying up to him. "Guildmaster," he said, handing over a stack of parchment. "Besides the 4 recruits you already approved, a lot of wizards applied today. I've registered all their details. Would you like to take a look?" Lucian nodded. He knew the capital was full of wandering sorcerers, some affiliated, many not, who'd heard of the fairy's legendary power and now hoped to join their ranks. It was exactly what he'd expected. "Show me the list," he said. Flipping through the pages, Lucian's eyes skimmed dozens of names, most of them ordinary practitioners, hardly surprising since the truly talented had already been scooped up by larger guilds and courts. Then 2 entries stopped him cold. "Hold on. Who are these 2 children?" he murmured. Among a sea of mediocre applicants, these 2 youngsters radiated an unmistakable potential, one that demanded a closer look. Lucian studied the 2 children standing before him. They looked barely 12 years old, frail, undernourished even, but each radiated the unmistakable spark of dragon-slaying magic. The boy to his left was Sting Eucliffe, a light attribute dragon-slaying wizard. Beside him stood Roger Cheney, whose magic pulsed with shadow. "Show me the rest of the applicants," Lucian said, his tone calm but decisive. He paced past them, already weighing their potential. Dragon-slaying wizards were the guild's greatest long-term investments. With proper guidance, even the humblest recruit could ascend to S-rank power. If these 2 bore no hidden flaws, Lucian would gladly welcome them into his ranks. Yet something about Sting and Roger gave him pause. According to every source, dragon-slaying magic emerged in one of 2 ways, by being taught directly by a dragon or by having a dragon-slaying crystal implanted in the body. The records listed both boys as orphans with no living relatives and no known mentors. If a dragon had personally trained them, did its lair still lie hidden somewhere, waiting to be uncovered? And if they owed their power to implanted crystals, who had acquired those rare gemstone and who had risked their lives to embed them? The questions circled Lucian's mind as he prepared to meet the other applicants. Before he could decide the fate of these 2 prodigies, he would need every answer. Chapter Text: Unlikely Recruits. Macau led Lucian through the doors of the makeshift hotel Fairy Tale had rented. The lobby buzzed with hopeful wizards, each eager to sign up for the guild. When they finally spotted Lucian, a tiny, unassuming cat, they froze in astonishment. "That's Lucian?" someone whispered. "I can't believe something so small wields that kind of power." Word of Lucian's feats had spread like wildfire. His spectacular display had turned him into a folk hero, an idol among ordinary citizens, and now a target for ambitious wizards yearning to match his strength. Just then, another murmur rippled through the crowd. "Look, there are 2 transcendents." Following their gaze, Lucian saw 2 children standing apart from the others. Their very presence crackled with a dragon's aura, and each child gently held a kitten in his arms. Lucian recognized the phenomenon immediately. Even though he'd missed the infamous Edras incident himself, he'd been on a century-long mission in the northern continent at the time. Macau had filled him in afterward. Fairy Tale's world, it turned out, was only one of many parallel realms. Lucian and his companion Habby hailed from Edras, where they were revered as transcendents, beings of incredible power. Ages ago, their queen foresaw a calamity that would threaten their entire race. To preserve their lineage, she dispatched 100 dragon eggs into this world, scattering them like seeds of hope across the dimensions. Now, gathered in this lobby, were wizards and dragons, transcendents and ordinary folk, all drawn by the promise of a new adventure. And at the center stood Lucian, the smallest cat with the greatest heart, ready to guide them into whatever challenges lay ahead. All the cats, Carla, Wendy's white exceed, Charles, Lucy's elegant feline companion, and Happy, had hatched from the same clutch of 100 mysterious eggs. Lucy herself, born of that very egg clan, was its princess. It stood to reason that the two wide-eyed children, clutching small, speckled kittens before him, had released theirs from those uncanny shells as well. The hotel lobby thrummed with the excited chatter of would-be wizards. Dozens of hopefuls in colorful robes pressed forward, eager to make a good impression on the guild that had outranked every other in the land. Then Lucian strode to the center of the room, his cobalt blue eyes sweeping the crowd, and spoke one word: silence. Instantly, the murmurs died. A subtle barrier, Lucian's own fusion of this world's three-dimensional text magic and Sakura's quiet card, blossomed unseen around the hall, snuffing out every sound within its radius. When he spoke again, his voice carried clearly. I know you all wish to join Fairy Tale. As the strongest guild in existence, however, we have strict standards. A ripple of apprehension swept through the silent assembly. Many guilds cared only about raw power, and most of these applicants had only middling magic. Line up and enter the testing chamber one at a time, Lucian continued, nodding toward a polished oak door at the far end of the hall. I will assess each of you in turn, but do not fear, our criteria extend beyond current strength. We value potential and character just as highly. A hush fell over the line as each candidate steeled himself for the trial ahead. Here, in the legendary halls of Fairy Tale, they would face their greatest test yet, and Lucian would decide whether they were truly worthy. Lucian surveyed the line of applicants in the small anteroom of the guild's temporary headquarters. In his hand, he held a slender crystal rod, the focus of revelation, capable of gently lifting any silence or mind-clouding spell. From today on, every wizard hoping to join the guild would submit to his memory screening. They didn't know what he was about to do. To them, it looked like nothing more than a light touch of the crystal to their foreheads. At Lucian's signal, Macau, his trusted aide, stepped forward and deactivated the silence wards around the candidates. One by one, Lucian tapped each apprentice with the rod. Images and impressions flickered behind his closed eyes. Past triumphs, secret ambitions, hidden grudges. A quiet pass or fail left his lips before he moved on. Most seniors, seasoned though they were, showed signs of arrogance or stagnation. Their power had plateaued, or worse, they nursed petty vendettas. They failed. A few promising youths whose potential still sparkled with raw magic passed easily. Half an hour later, only two remained, the two Dragon Slayer apprentices whose reputations had preceded them. Lucian steadied himself, aware that these children would shape the guild's future. He pressed the crystal rod to the first boy's temple. A rush of vivid memories, fierce training in the mountains, a single-minded determination to conquer drakes and worms alike. Pass, Lucian said softly. The child's shoulders relaxed, hope flickering in his eyes. He moved to the second. As the silvery threads of memory unfurled, of loss, of vengeance, of a fire that claimed half his village, Lucian felt his heart tighten. He hesitated, brow furrowing. Finally, he whispered, pass. But the weight of what he'd seen stayed with him, and for the first time that day, he found himself at a loss for words. Lucian watched in silence as the two children drifted out of the chamber, their laughter fading around the corner. Once the door clicked into place, he pressed a hand to his temple and whispered, of all things, no wonder Natsu couldn't break through the ward last time. They're over 400 years old. He closed his eyes and summoned the memory echoes he had just drawn from the children's minds. Each recollection glowed like a shard of ancient glass, revealing fragments of a history long buried. As he sifted through their memories, twilight battles fought in forgotten realms, pacts sworn beneath blood-red moons, a single, staggering revelation emerged. The secret they carried would upend everything Lucian thought he knew about magic, loyalty, and the fragile line between life and legend.